Chapter 884. Fourth Young Mississippi. Xiang Chengyun talked for the whole journey, and Ling Han listened the whole way. When they reached the imperial capital of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire, Ling Han had a considerable understanding of the Scarlet Heaven Academy. This top academy in the imperial capital of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire had existed for more than 100 millennia. After many years of development, it was divided into the northern, southern, eastern, and western institutions. Although they were all in the imperial capital, they could be considered four independent institutions and had a fiercely competitive relationship with one another. If Ling Han wanted to enroll in the Scarlet Heaven Academy, with his status as the monarch of a nation, he would only need to speak to the left minister, and his enrollment into the academy would definitely be a small matter. However, I would advise you to best enter based on your own merits, Xiang Chengyun said. After another 10 days, the Northern Institution will hold the enrollment ceremony that would take place once every 20 years. If you are able to show an excellent performance, then you will be able to gain the focus, nurturing, and attention from the institution. Otherwise, Lord Left Minister indeed can easily send you into the institution, but you will only become an ordinary student. Ling Han knew that the four institutions held their enrollment ceremonies separately from each other. There would be a chance once every 5 years. If one could pass the enrollment test and get in based on his own merits, then the more excellent his results, the more it was possible that he would be able to gain the focused attention of the institution. He would be able to gain an incline in terms of cultivation resources. Naturally, he would also be able to gain an immortal level cultivation technique. This year, it was the Northern Institution's turn to enroll new students. 5 years later, it would be the Eastern Institution's turn, and after another 5 years, it would be the Southern Institution. It was a 20-year cycle. However, if one wanted to enroll into the Scarlet Heaven Academy, then the minimum requirement was the Shattering Void tier. Every institution was further divided into 5 levels, which corresponded with the 4 minor levels of the Shattering Void tier and the Mountain River tier. As for those who had reached the peak of the Mountain River tier, then sorry, but if you wanted to continue to ascend further than that, you would have to think of something on your own. For example, you could become the disciple of some elite, join some powerful force, or simply set out to explore ancient historical sites to obtain higher-level cultivation techniques. Ling Han now did not need to consider the things after Mountain River tier. After entering the Scarlet Heaven Academy, he could at least learn cultivation techniques all the way up to the Mountain River tier. He had to get in. Ling Han pondered. He had just arrived in the immortal realm, and was still a stranger in a strange place. He needed a place to stay so he could calmly observe this world, and as the Alchemy Emperor, there was definitely ample scope for him to showcase his abilities. The imperial capital of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire was named Point Star City, and was astonishingly huge. It was at least 100 times the size of the imperial capital of the Great Ling Empire. One could see the light of formations flickering on all 4 sides of the imperial city from afar. They could explode with terrifying might at any moment. According to Xiang Chengyun, if any immortals below the heavenly body tier dared to barge in forcefully, they would be killed directly by the formations. There was no other possibility. It was definitely not inferior to Ling Han's imperial palace in any way, and was built from materials that were definitely 100 times, 1,000 times more precious. Looking from afar, one would be able to see that there were images of true dragons and true phoenixes flying around above the manor, making for a very grand and majestic sight. If even the manor of the left minister was like this, then how would the palace of the empress look like? Xiang Chengyun arrived at the manor's entrance, showed proof of his identity, and brought Ling Han inside. He seemed to have considerable status in the manor, as servants would all respectfully bow and pay respects to him on the way. Very soon, they arrived at an elegant courtyard. Xiang Chengyun had Ling Han sit down on a stone stool by the side and wait, whereas he himself entered indoors to inform the left minister. Theoretically, with the fact that Ling Han had yet to even enter into immortal level, he was absolutely not qualified to meet personally with the left minister. However, Ling Han still had the identity of the monarch of the Great Ling Empire, and furthermore had successfully opened the sky. This was quite extraordinary, and the left minister became interested in meeting Ling Han. Ling Han waited quietly. Sha sha sha. After a while, the sound of footsteps were heard from the bushes. Ling Han turned around, only to see a young girl strolling over. She was dressed in a long skirt as green as lake water. It had a very fitting cut and completely outlined her shapely figure. However, because it was a skirt, It allowed her to exude a more graceful and spirited feeling. This young girl looked to be only 16 or 17 years old. She was incredibly beautiful, her almond eyes curved yet showing a hint of mischief. One look, and he could tell she was the young Miss type with a lot of weird ideas. She was at the Shattering Void tier in its 9th layer. As for her battle prowess, he could not tell how many stars she had reached just from appearance alone. If this young girl was really only 16 or 17, then it would be shocking. However, this was the immortal realm, and it was not uncommon to see Shattering Void tier elites who were younger than 20 here. For example, weren't Xiao Miaoyan, Wu Gaoyuan, and their likes the same? Besides, the left minister's power was much stronger than the 5 sects, so it would be nothing surprising for an even younger Shattering Void tier elite to appear here. This young girl obviously spotted Ling Han as well. She crossed her arms behind her back, walked towards Ling Han, and then circled around him once. Pursing her lips, she said, "Kid, which clan's junior are you? Here to go through my daddy's back door so you can stuff yourself into the Scarlet Heaven Academy. Let me tell you, young people have to depend on themselves. For example, even though I am the 4th young miss, didn't I also follow the rules? Now preparing to pass the test of the Northern Institution to enter into the academy?" The young girl spoke in a very mature tone as if she was educating someone. She was the 4th daughter of the left minister. Xiang Chengyun would naturally not share gossip about the left minister's private life with him. Thus, Ling Han also had no idea how many sons, daughters, and other juniors the left minister had. He smiled calmly and said, "I think 4th young miss has misunderstood." The other party thought of him as someone who had come to get in through the back door, to enroll into the Scarlet Heaven Academy with the help of the left minister. "What did I misunderstand?" the young girl said in a tsundere way. Her jade-like beautiful face was extremely dazzling, and indescribably good-looking. "I indeed plan on entering into the Scarlet Heaven Academy, but have no intention of asking for the Lord Left Minister's help. Instead, I plan to pass the enrollment test myself and get in on my own," Ling Han explained with a smile. "Yo, after hearing my words, you've become stubborn." The young girl laughed loudly. "Fine then, let's spar. Let me see how much ability you have." Ling Han shook his head and answered, "I am a few years older than you, so if I fought you, I'd be a bully. Che, you are in the 9th layer of Shattering Void tier, and so am I. Who's afraid?" The young girl was obviously an undisciplined and uncontrollable young miss. She immediately leaped at Ling Han, her slender hand delivering a palm strike aimed right at Ling Han's chest. However, though she was unruly, she was not a bad person. This palm strike only had 70% of her power behind it as she had withdrawn the other 30%. If Ling Han was not her match, then she would draw back all her power so that she would not wound Ling Han. Ling Han casually blocked, and Pang power spread out. The two of them stepped back at the same time. Ling Han retreated 7 steps, while the young girl merely took 3 steps back. It was not that Ling Han was not strong enough, but rather that he had only used a bit of his power. But he still nodded internally. This young girl's battle prowess had actually reached 16 stars, and this had already surpassed the 8 kings. It was only inferior to the likes of Xiao Miaoyan. However, she obviously still had a lot of space for improvement. It would be very, very difficult for her to reach a battle prowess of 20 stars in the future, but it was still possible for her to reach 19 stars. Chapter 885. Depending on you. I couldn't tell, but you do have a bit of ability." The young girl appeared surprised. The difference of a single star of Shattering Void tier meant a world of difference, and in the immortal realm this applied as well. Starting from 9 stars of Shattering Void tier, there were pitifully few that had more than 10 stars of battle prowess, and 14 stars was yet another great barrier. If there was 1 in 100 that could reach battle prowess above 10 stars of Shattering Void tier, then there was at most only 1 in 10,000 that could achieve 15 stars of battle prowess. Although the young girl had not given it her all, her casual strike was still at least worth 13 to 14 stars of battle prowess, but the other party was actually able to match her evenly, which naturally caused her to feel slightly shocked. Again! Her competitive spirit had been incited, and she immediately started to deliver a rain of attacks on Ling Han. Ling Han, as one who had lived 2 lifetimes, knew that this kind of young miss was not someone to trifle with. It would be all right if he lost, but if he won, she would definitely not drop the matter. However, he also had his pride, so why was there a need for him to lose? Thus, he casually parried and blocked, maintaining the situation in which neither of them had the upper hand. After repetitive unsuccessful attacks, the young girl's temper flared up, and she no longer thought about withholding her power. As her hands flew out in blows, she gave it her full effort, determined to defeat Ling Han. Unfortunately, Ling Han had presently reached 16 stars merely in pure strength alone, and as the saying went, a physically strong person would be able to defeat 10 opponents skilled in technique, so even if he did not use any technique, he was able to suppress her fully. Ling Han naturally would not do that. He merely maintained the stalemate, and even allowed the young girl to feel as if she was slightly having the upper hand, though she was still unable to completely dominate him. The space in the immortal realm was indeed sturdy. Yet Ling Han's thoughts had strayed elsewhere. If two great elites with battle prowess of 16 stars of Shattering Void tier fought it out in the lower realm, then he presumed that not just this garden, but even the whole Point Star City would undoubtedly explode. But now, the waves of power they created actually just shook a few tree leaves in the garden, just as if they had returned to the body refining tier. Pang pang pang. The two people fought vigorously, but it was practically the young girl on the attack, whereas Ling Han was purely on defense. Good men would not fight with women, so what could he prove by winning against this young girl? Presently, Ling Han only wanted to defeat the 5 sects and the AO clan, whereas in the future, he wished to surpass the elites of the Rock Palace. Wei Wei, stop. An austere voice rang out. Ling Han was on the defense in the first place, merely wanting her to stop and not intending to fight back. Thus, he naturally withdrew as well, leaving the decision in the hands of the young girl. No, I want to defeat him, I'm just a breath away, the young girl declared with a pout and adorable naivete. Two people walked outdoors. One was a man that looked to be only in his 40s, dressed in a Qilin robe, giving off an air of might without expressing any anger. The other was Xiang Chengyun. He was respectfully following behind this man, his hands stuck on either side of him as if he was a servant. Needless to say, this middle-aged man was the left minister of the empire, Li Cheng, also known as Minister Li, a super elite of the heavenly body tier. You little girl, could it be that you still do not know that he is going easy on you after such a long fight? Minister Li asked, smiling. What? The young girl immediately stopped. Tilting her head to one side, she looked at Ling Han and asked, Hey, tell me the truth, were you purposely going easy on me? Fourth young miss has extraordinary talent and ability. Ling Han did not answer directly, but instead circled around and began to praise the young girl's talent in martial arts. This was not mere flattery from him, though, as she was indeed very extraordinary. The young girl was instantly all smiles, not realizing that Ling Han had changed the topic. She proudly raised her head, her snow-white nape showing off her elegance as if it was the neck of a swan. One would feel pleased just from looking at her. Her name was Li Weiwei, the fourth and youngest daughter of the left minister. The left minister had a total of 4 daughters. The right minister, on the other hand, had 8 sons, and they really deserved to be called rivals. Minister Li said, Girl, did you know that this young man has just come from a small world? Oh, isn't it just shattering the empty void? Li Weiwei said carelessly. With how big the Joint Peace Planet, there was a good several thousand people that ascended here from a small world every year, and on average, there were at least a dozen every day. You just shattered the empty void after reaching the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier. You are really one with little courage. She was a bit disdainful. Stepping into the Shattering Void tier, one would be qualified to shatter the void to enter into the immortal realm. Even if you were the more careful type, then you should have acted the moment you reached the 5th or 6th layer, but you came to the immortal realm only after dragging it out into the 9th layer. Really, what a scaredy cat. Minister Li revealed an astute smile and asked, Weiwei, why don't we have a wager? What kind of wager? Li Weiwei asked without thinking too deeply. We'll just wager on the outcome of the battle between you and Ling Han. Minister Li smiled. If you win, I will not attempt to control you any more in the future, and you can go wherever you like to play. All right, you're not allowed to weasel out. Li Weiwei was immediately pleased. She had always wanted to leave the imperial capital and travel around, but Minister Li would keep worrying about this and that, and protected her very securely. She was afraid that her father would take back his words, and immediately put up a fighting stance, ready to start fighting Ling Han at any moment. Minister Li spread out his hands in front of him and said, If you lose. How could I possibly lose? Li Weiwei interrupted. In the current era, only a shattering void tier cultivator like her would dare to interrupt the words of an elite of the heavenly body tier. Minister Li was naturally not going to become angry. Although he had 4 daughters, his first 3 daughters had married a few millennia ago already. This youngest daughter, meanwhile, had been born just over a dozen years ago, and was also the one that he doted on the most. If you lose, then you will have to be at least in the Mountain River tier to be able to leave the Imperial capital, and reach the Sun Moon tier to be able to leave the territory of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire, he said, smiling. No matter how his daughter thought about it, there was no reason to lose. Fine. Li Weiwei nodded. Presently, she only wanted to defeat Ling Han. Then, she would be able to leave the imperial capital and travel to various nations and lands, enjoying a life of freedom. She rushed out and began her attacks on Ling Han. Ling Han was still as how he had been, casually blocking and parrying. He had no intention of becoming a tool in the wager between this father and daughter, but it seemed to be unavoidable. Ling Han, I'm depending on you, you have to win. Minister Li smiled as he said to Ling Han. Although he was all smiles, he had an air of supreme authority about him, which was both because he was an elite of the heavenly body tier and because he was the left minister of a majestic empire. Ling Han gave out a sigh. If he disobeyed, then the left minister would definitely make life difficult for him. This kind of elite, this kind of noble, it would be really too easy for him to deal with Ling Han. It was absolutely impossible that anyone would be willing to stand up for him. Furthermore, even if the left minister killed him, they could always put another puppet in place. He increased a bit of his battle prowess, and instantly gained the upper hand. However, he still left some face for Li Weiwei, and merely defeated her after over 100 moves. Li Weiwei could not accept this. How could this be? Possibly a lower realm cultivator was so fearful that he had to wait until he reached the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier to dare to enter into the immortal realm. Actually surpassed her in battle prowess. She shook her head blankly. After a while she said, I do not yield, we'll battle again. Minister Li finally laughed loudly, and said, Silly girl, Ling Han is the master of the small world. He had opened the sky successfully just a few days ago, bringing along the whole small world with him to ascend into the immortal realm. Ah! It was only now Li Weiwei realized that she had misunderstood previously. It turned out that Ling Han was not fearful of death, but rather dragged things out to the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier because he wanted to split open the sky. Those capable of opening the sky were definitely the prodigies of the era. She had fallen into the trap. Both Ling Han and her old man had fooled her together. Despicable. Too despicable. She was angry now. Chapter 886. Offended. Li Weiwei glared at Ling Han. It's bad enough that my father lied to me. You are just a stranger. What right do you have to bully me? How have I offended you that you would treat me like this? Haha, now you must accept the consequences of losing the bet. You shall henceforth attend the Scarlet Heaven Academy. Don't keep thinking of running around. Minister Li said sternly. He was really fearful that this precious daughter of his would lose her temper and adopt a confrontational stance instead. Li Weiwei pouted her small lips. I naturally won't disobey my father's command, but this brat, humph. I won't let him off easy, and shall punish him until he begs for mercy. Ling Han's feelings were only expressed through his eyes. He knew that this young lady wouldn't be willing to leave the matter to rest as it was. But what could be done? The left minister had already put it this way: if he were to deliberately lose to Li Weiwei, then he would be going against the left minister. The consequences resulting from the two choices would be completely different. However, he had nothing to fear if it was only this kind of crafty and unruly young lady. He was only fearful if the other party would bring out some immortal-level elite of the immortal realm. If Ling Han did not wish to expose the secret of the Black Tower, he could only restrain his annoyance at the moment. It is best not to force me, Ling Han said to himself. He might seem to be easygoing, but this in fact clashed with his proud and unyielding character. If worse comes to worst, then let the matter be resolved in battle. Haha, Weiwei, you ought to learn more from Ling Han. He had come here by splitting open the sky. Who knows how much greater his martial arts talent will be compared to yours? Minister Li used Ling Han as an example with the intention to properly educate his daughter. If this sentence had been directed to any subordinate, the other party would have shown great reverence and even put up an appearance of sincerely asking Ling Han for guidance. But why would Li Weiwei care? Had she really intended to be obedient, why would the left minister have needed to put up a front and intentionally set up a trap with the bet? Even an extremely powerful person would also have a weak spot. The weak spot of Minister Li was obviously this young daughter, so thoroughly spoiled that he was even reluctant to rebuke her. Li Weiwei was still groaning, staring intently at Ling Han with her beautiful eyes. Naturally, she was not the least bit convinced, but she was quite curious. This brat does not seem to possess any kind of remarkable abilities. Why was he capable of splitting open the sky? Every year, it was not uncommon for thousands of shattering void tier cultivators from the lower realms to enter the immortal realm, but those who had come by splitting open the sky had never appeared before, at least not in the history of the chaotic star's majestic empire. He was a man who had created history. Originally, she would have been very curious, but now she only has one thought in mind: to make this puffed-up two-faced brat pay dearly for daring to trick her. She cleared her throat and said, "That was just him being able to cultivate to a slightly more powerful level of the shattering void tier. He might not necessarily be able to break through to the immortal level. If he isn't able to reach the immortal level, then no matter how monstrously powerful he is, won't he still be suppressed easily? Moreover, there are 5 great tiers within the immortal level, which is further divided into 20 minor layers, with each step being much more difficult than the last. That's plenty to climb, so there's nothing to be proud of." Minister Li burst out laughing and shook his head. "You are not as skilled as the other party. You have already lost, but still dare to look down on others?" "Oh, I was just careless." Li Weiwei ran to Minister Li. Tugging at his arm, she stared at Ling Han, pointing at him. "Whatever, Han, we shall have another match 10 days later. But this time it will be at the enrollment of the Northern Institution. I do not believe that I'm not able to defeat you." At this stage, conceding wouldn't make the other party give up, but instead make her look down upon him with even more disdain. Ling Han smiled lightly and said, "Sure. Then we will just have another match at that time." His response was mild and light-hearted, as if he did not take the matter seriously at all. Li Weiwei was so angry that she wanted to stomp her foot. This outrageous brat! How dares he disregard me like this? One should know that she was one of the 3 great beauties in the imperial capital. Who knew how many juniors of generals or important officials wanted to marry her? Yet she paid no heed to them. "You are just a country boy, but act like a snob." "No, I can't wait for 10 days. If I have to endure such vexation for 10 days, I will definitely explode." Li Weiwei immediately turned around and left. She had to look for someone to lend her a hand in suppressing Ling Han. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to get any sleep tonight. This young woman was used to being willful. Minister Li couldn't do anything about it. He really wasn't able to put on a serious face and berate her, so he could only shake his head and give a bitter smile. Then, his expression immediately turned businesslike as he said to Ling Han, "Do tell me more about your small world and the situation of splitting open the sky." Ling Han gave a mostly truthful account of the entire situation. Naturally, he mentioned neither the Black Tower, nor the fact that he had a past life. There was also some other important information which he had withheld, such as the Rock Palace and the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire, which had nothing to do with the splitting open of the sky. The left minister was quite a cautious person. Only after inquiring about every detail regarding the splitting open of the sky did he nod and say, "According to Cheng Yun, you wish to enter the Scarlet Heaven Academy yourself?" "Yes," Ling Han answered respectfully. Although he had lived 2 lifetimes as a human, he really didn't know how many millennia younger he was compared to the left minister. Furthermore, the latter was also an elite of the heavenly body tier, so it was only right that Ling Han accorded him some respect. In the world of martial arts, the strong would always be respected. However, Ling Han would never bow to another. Given his proud and unyielding character, how could he bring himself to go down on his knees or bend his waist? Minister Li smiled and said, "Since you can split open the sky, your battle prowess must have reached 20 stars of shattering void tier. Among the new students in this batch, your battle prowess should be the strongest. However, the enrollment of the Scarlet Heaven Academy isn't based on battle prowess, but rather martial arts talent, the strength of one's spirit, and battle skills. If you want to enter the top 10 or even the top 3, it will be very difficult." He was totally not optimistic about Ling Han. How could the cultivators of a small world be more talented than the geniuses here? Not to mention that with the guidance of immortal-level elites, there was no comparison when it came to battle skills, either. How much of a gap would it be compared to the cultivators of a small world? And the spirit was the biggest shortcoming of cultivators of a small world. They had only begun to cultivate the spirit after reaching the Shattering Void tier. However, descendants of influential officials like Li Weiwei would have gotten a variety of treasures to nurture their spirit from birth. So, even if it was only 10 to 20 years, how many times stronger would their spirit be compared to those of cultivators from a small world? Therefore, if it was a competition on battle prowess, then Ling Han would basically be first place. However, according to the usual areas of assessment by the Scarlet Heaven Academy, entering the top 10 would be extremely difficult for Ling Han, what more getting first place. I am willing to give it a try, Ling Han said. He had full of confidence in himself. Minister Li nodded. Given his cultivation level and status, having made time to see Ling Han was really already giving a lot of face to the latter. It was mainly because Ling Han had come by splitting open the sky, which was very rare, so he wanted to meet him once. Since he had met Ling Han, he then gave him a few words of encouragement as the latter would be his subordinate, after all. In these 10 days, you will live here first. When you have entered the Scarlet Heaven Academy, then you may move there. Ling Han nodded and said, I appreciate your hospitality. For Changyun, there was no need for Minister Li to speak out at all, and he had already gestured Ling Han to take his leave, saying, Lord Left Minister needs to rest now, so I shall bring you to settle down in a side courtyard. The two went out. Stroking his beard, Minister Li murmured, even though his talent may not be the best, seeing that he could come here by splitting open the sky, there must be something extraordinary about him. If there are any skills that shine during the enrollment, it would be worthwhile for me to nurture him. After all, that time is coming soon. Moreover, Luo Ba was much more of a genius, his battle prowess almost reaching 19 stars. He was one of the 3 elites of the younger generation in the imperial capital. Of course, this young man had yet to reach the immortal level. Otherwise, no matter how monstrous a Shattering Void tier cultivator was, he wouldn't be able to withstand the pressure from a single gaze of a cultivator of the Mountain River tier. This was the crushing pressure inflicted by immortals upon the mortals. Although Luo Lai wasn't as good as his older brother, he had also attained battle prowess of 17 stars, and was full of himself. Therefore, when he was incited by Li Weiwei earlier, he quickly ran over and wanted to give Ling Han a good beating in order to please Li Weiwei. You have offended our 4th young Mississippi. Why aren't you kneeling down to apologize? Luo Lai said proudly. He was self-absorbed with his own status. According to Li Weiwei, the other party had come from a small world. He naturally wasn't willing to exchange blows with Ling Han, considering this to be an insult to himself. Is he worthy? A lowly commoner from a small world. Li Weiwei immediately became dissatisfied. What she wanted wasn't for Ling Han to kneel down and apologize to her, but for Ling Han to be defeated. These two were completely different notions altogether. Could Luo Lai compare to her when it came to powerful influence? In this case, she wouldn't have to pull the other party all the way here. Ling Han gave a faint smile, thinking to himself, whether it is a small world or the immortal realm, people are actually all the same. The only difference being that people of the immortal realm are a little bit more powerful. However, the juniors of influential officials will inevitably be full of arrogance and order other people around. This was a disease which should be treated. I don't have a habit of kneeling down to others. Why don't you give me a demonstration? Ling Han replied, not giving any face to the other party or Li Weiwei. He had already seen through it. This kind of crafty and unruly young lady couldn't be spoiled. The more she was spoiled, the more she would become stubborn and unreasonable. Luo Lai's expression immediately darkened. He said, a lowly commoner of the small world actually dares to talk back to me? Do you know what my Luo clan represents? It was a title of nobility granted by the Empress herself, inherited from generation to generation. Ling Han's expression immediately turned dark as he said, you keep on saying lowly commoner, but that won't highlight your nobility. Apologize to me, otherwise I will beat you up until you beg for mercy. Ha 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 ha. Luo Li roared with laughter as he held his belly, saying, I could laugh myself to death. You, a lowly commoner of a small world, actually dare to ask me to apologize to you? Are you worthy? Are you worthy? Are you worthy? He repeated thrice, "Are you worthy?" an assertion of his contempt towards Ling Han. Ling Han said coldly, "This is the left minister's residence. I live here as a guest of the left minister. You came here to the left minister's residence to humiliate his guest. You are disrespecting the left minister." Fuck. Luo Lai was stunned, and the corner of his mouth twitched slightly. You really know how to pin the blame on someone else. I've only just called you a lowly commoner, and this is a fact. How did this relate to disrespecting the left minister? These words couldn't be taken to be true. Otherwise, he would be punished even if he was a descendant of the Luo clan. Contempt against the left minister was a serious crime. You are talking rubbish," he gasped. "In this case, then you had better kneel down." Ling Han suddenly raised his voice. Luo Lai was genuinely stunned by Ling Han's roar, and almost went down on his knees. Fortunately, he abruptly recovered and stopped himself in time. Fuck him. Aren't these two different matters altogether? Why should I kneel? Luo Lai came to his own realization. Why should he go along with Ling Han's reasoning? His breathing quickened, and his eyes were about to spit fire. The young master of the Luo clan was actually led around by the nose by a lowly commoner from a small world. He took out a sword from a spatial spirit tool, puffed up his chest, and said, "Congratulations, you have successfully irritated me. I will teach you a good lesson and let you know that this is not a small world. With just your little bit of strength, you only deserve to be a bastard with your tail tucked in between your legs." Li Weiwei was also quite annoyed. "I asked you to come and fight. What are you rambling on about?" However, the two were finally getting into a fight, so she cast aside her annoyance. She did not tell Luo Lai that Ling Han came by splitting open the sky. She merely played down the details, and just mentioned that Ling Han came from a small world. Otherwise, she was certain that Luo Lai wouldn't dare to fight with Ling Han. In her eyes, she had hoped that the one who would come to fight wasn't Luo Lai, but his older brother Luo Ba, one of the three elites of the younger generation in the imperial capital. It didn't matter. Once Luo Li was defeated, the Luo clan would be humiliated. Could Luo Ba sit still and do nothing? Based on this, it could be seen that Li Weiwei was actually quite adherent to customs. Otherwise, it would have been very easy for her to mess with someone of the Shattering Void tier. There was an abundance of masters in the left minister's residence after all. However, it could also be seen that she was an extremely proud person, and disdained the use of status to suppress Ling Han. One had to rise from where one had fallen. However, Luo Lai naturally had been deceived by her. Chapter 888. Convince through virtue. Ling Han did not intend to let Luo Lai off. He was an emperor after all, the supreme leader of a small world. After entering the immortal realm, he had been oppressed on the left and suppressed on the right. Even though he'd been psychologically prepared, it didn't mean that he had no temper. Now that Luo Lai had provoked him, he would just use him as a punching bag to vent his frustration. Give him a beating, no big deal. In any case, he was also a guest of the left minister and the sovereign of a small country. No matter how small the country was, it would still rank higher than the Luo clan in terms of protocol. Therefore, even if he were to cripple or kill Luo Lai, the Luo clan could only bitterly swallow this loss. Even if they wanted to take revenge against him, they wouldn't send out an elite of immortal level, and could only send out someone of the Shattering Void tier. After all, everyone had to be seen adhering to the rules of propriety in public. However, if it was to be a battle between two Shattering Void tier cultivators, then why should Ling Han be afraid of anyone? Or rather, who could actually rival Ling Han? Even if the other party could use the power of the nation, nothing would change. Within 3 moves, I will make you kneel down and concede defeat. Ling Han said indifferently, but this actually exuded his domineering side. Li Weiwei couldn't help feeling somewhat baffled. It was something that she hadn't been able to see before. This aloof man actually had such a spirited side. At that moment, she suddenly recalled that the person in question had come by splitting open the sky. She still had no idea that at the time when Ling Han was splitting open the sky, he had been attacked by immortals. Otherwise, she would have been more shocked, and even come to idolize him. I dare to ask the world, is there another who could do it? Luo Lai was mad with anger. You are just someone who came from a small world, yet you dare to be so arrogant? Do you really think this is a small world? He charged forward in one big stride, brandishing his long sword to stab at Ling Han's left shoulder. He wanted to pierce through Ling Han in a single strike. Ling Han put one hand behind his back, then flicked his finger. With a ding, the sword immediately rebounded. Ah! Luo Lai screamed loudly as the flesh between his thumb and index finger suddenly split open, and blood spurted from the wound. Pa 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 pa, and the long sword actually broke apart into 7 pieces and fell to the ground. Li Weiwei became numb and speechless, her mouth wide agape. What level of strength is this? Luo Lai's battle prowess was 17 stars of shattering void tier. The younger generation of the entire imperial capital knew about this. Even if he didn't use his full strength, it ought to be at least 16 stars. Just now Li Weiwei was naturally able to conclude this as she had the battle prowess of 16 stars herself. The power of 16 stars was actually no match for Ling Han. What was even more frightening was the sword. That level 10 spirit tool was broken apart before it could even unleash its might. She slightly stuck out her tongue as she had just come to a realization that Ling Han had gone a lot easier on her when they were dueling. Speaking of which, it was quite peculiar. If Ling Han was stronger than her by only 1 star or just by a little bit, the stifling pain in her chest wouldn't be easily relieved. But now that she had found out that his strength exceeded hers by so much more, she became convinced, and was even secretly a little grateful to Ling Han, who didn't let her lose too badly. It went without saying that a young woman's heart changed unpredictably, and was impossible to fathom. You! Luo Lai looked at Ling Han aghast. His face was filled with shock. He even doubted if his older brother was capable of such strength. Wasn't Ling Han a lowly commoner of a small world? How could he be this strong? You still have 2 moves. Ling Han said calmly as he extended his right hand and pressed gently. Boom! How powerful was his current strength? 16 stars of shattering void tier. It had completely reached the level of destroying 10,000 techniques with just one application of strength. When the strength pressed down, it was powerful like a tall mountain, immediately causing Luo Lai to be so shaken that he prostrated himself on the ground. Luo Lai only felt that there was a towering mountain pressing onto his back. He couldn't move a finger at all. Even the bones in his body were being broken with crackling ka, and cold sweat was streaming all over him. Unfortunately, although he was the junior of a high-ranking official, he did not have any official position, and wasn't engraved onto the totem. Therefore, he wasn't able to call upon the power of the nation, and naturally had no possibility of turning the tables. A person must remain humble. Bear in mind that there will always be others who are better than yourself, Ling Han said in a calm and composed manner. I have always convinced others through my own strength. Do you admit defeat or not? Pooh! Li Weiwei suddenly burst into laughter. You are pressing down on Luo Lai with one hand, and he almost spat out his tongue. Then you even said you convince others through your own strength. How shameless! Hey, how come the same shameless man actually made her feel amused now? Luo Lai had only one thought, which was, a wise man knew not to fight when the odds were against him. He quickly said, I admit defeat. I admit defeat. His chest was about to be crushed. Ling Han shook his head and said, You replied so quickly. It's obvious that you didn't properly reflect upon your mistakes, and lack sincerity. Li Weiwei finally couldn't stop herself from laughing out loud. She was also a weird person. What she hated the most was following the rules. After seeing this side of Ling Han, she immediately developed a favorable impression of him, and became attracted to this fellow of similar mindset. Luo Lai spat out a mouthful of blood. He had come to exact retribution for Li Weiwei, but now that he had fallen into such a pathetic state, Li Weiwei neither asked to stop nor lent him a helping hand, and was instead laughing happily on the sidelines. What the fuck? I really admit defeat. He clenched his teeth. His tears came flowing down in disappointment. Since his childhood, when had he ever been so humiliated? Then I will spare you this one time. Ling Han retracted his hand, appearing indifferent. Luo Lai glanced at Li Weiwei, but he saw that the other party was not at all concerned with him. He couldn't help but clench his teeth, and abruptly walked away. Having suffered such a great humiliation, he was also too embarrassed to entangle her again. Ha 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 ha! Li Weiwei was so ecstatic that she clapped her hands. However, after a fit of laughter, when she saw Ling Han had turned around and was about to return indoor, she couldn't help feeling annoyed. Taking large strides, she rushed past him and spread out both her arms to block Ling Han, asking, "Whatever, Han, why don't you ask me why I am laughing so happily?" Although she hadn't reached 20 years of age, her body was very well developed. With this one action of spreading both her arms, the two mounds on her chest, plump and full of vitality, were bouncing up and down as if they were about to jump out. They stood erect, round and big. Ling Han readily accepted her point, asking, "Why?" "Ha ha." Li Weiwei was beyond proud when she said, "The imbecile earlier was such a nuisance. I have absolutely no interest in him, but he kept sticking to me all the time. Now that you have taught him a good lesson on my behalf, don't you think that I should be happy?" "Oh." Ling Han nodded. He walked around past her, intending to continue on his path. "Hey, hey, hey." Li Weiwei quickly went to block him again, her towering chest almost touching Ling Han, but she did not notice it at all. "There's more." Although Luo Lai's strength isn't that powerful, he still has an older brother called Luo Ba is very strong indeed. Reportedly his battle prowess has almost reached 19 stars. You've hit his brother, so Luo Ba will definitely not let the matter drop. At that time, he will come to put you in your place. Hee. This strategy is called killing two birds with one stone. It serves to both ruthlessly humiliate that nuisance and teach you a good lesson. What do you say, aren't I a genius? She lifted her chin proudly, her neck as beautiful as that of a swan's. Ling Han smiled lightly and said, "Amongst shattering void tier cultivators, I am invincible. It doesn't matter who comes." These words might make him sound like an arrogant prick, but coming from his mouth, it also exuded ultimate assertion. Li Weiwei could not help but stare blankly. Chapter 889. The Power of Regulation. After a moment of distraction, Li Weiwei swiftly halted Ling Han's movement again, saying, "Do you know why the enrollment test of the Scarlet Heaven Academy isn't based on battle prowess, but rather martial arts talent, the strength of one's spirit, and battle skills, these three areas?" "Oh, why?" Ling Han asked with a smile. Actually, he really didn't want to indulge in idle chit-chat with this crafty and unruly young lady. The Immortal Realms regulations were perfected had planned to spend the next 10 days to cultivate the power of regulation. Perhaps he couldn't even scratch the surface with 10 days of cultivation, but it was better than squandering the time away. Li Weiwei was quite vexed. Why is this guy always giving me the cold shoulder? He was like this in front of my father, and still the same now that we are alone. One should know that she was one of the 3 great beauties in the imperial capital. Who knew how many young elites would want to be alone with her? This blockhead from a small world. There must be something wrong with his brain. That's why he doesn't know how to appreciate my beauty. No, he must be an ice block. That's right. Otherwise, why would he be called Ling Han 1? She snorted and said, "Because if you remain in the Shattering Void tier longer, you can always improve your battle prowess slightly. But in this world, the most important thing is still advancing through the cultivation levels. Your martial arts talent and strength of spirit will determine the speed of your advancement through the cultivation levels in the immortal level, and battle skills will be the key to victory in a battle between those of the same level." "It makes sense." Ling Han nodded. This was truly the case, so he certainly agreed. Li Weiwei had the urge to strangle Ling Han to death. "I have said so much, and you merely responded with an 'it makes sense' in a dismissive manner?" She pouted and said, "Blockhead, I will be looking forward to seeing you being taught a good lesson. Also, after 10 days if I win, then you will have to kneel before me and concede defeat." Ling Han burst out laughing. How was it possible that he would lose? He nodded and said, "That's a promise. But, what if I win?" "If you win?" "Pah! If you win, you win. Don't tell me that you even want me to proclaim defeat?" Li Weiwei initially wanted to add on some grand speech, but then she recalled the strength he exhibited earlier, and thus immediately changed her mind. "I am the daughter of the left minister, so I can be this willful. Infuriate you to death." Ling Han just smiled, and did not take this to heart. He bypassed Li Weiwei and walked into the house. Li Weiwei thought to stop him, but after some consideration, gave up on the idea. It would be better to wait for Luo Ba to challenge Ling Han. At most, it would only be 10 days she would have another match with Ling Han then. She didn't believe that she would lose to Ling Han in the areas of martial arts talent, strength of the spirit, and battle skills. As long as she won in one area, she could boast about a twinning in one area was still a win, right? As for the 2 areas that she lost? Pa. If that blockhead dared to bring this up, she would have his head. Ling Han returned inside the courtyard, and began practicing his cultivation in seclusion. Upon stepping into the flower blossom tier 2, he would be placed above the rest. It would only be 10 days away. He didn't want to stir up any trouble. The regulations of the immortal realm were complete, and just by looking at the limited destructive power of the shattering void tier, it could be deduced that the space in this realm was stable to a terrifying degree. In a sense, the immortal level was a process of comprehending the power of regulation. At different stages, comprehension of the power of regulation would be different, and the destructive power would also be different accordingly. Upon reaching the Genesis tier, just one thought could break limitless regulations and easily destroy a planet infinitely terrifying. However, whether it could be done just by attaining the minor accomplishment of the Genesis tier or one ought to reach the level of perfection, no one knew. After all, Yi Shuang was merely in the Sun-Moon tier, while Cheng Yun had only reached the Mountain River tier, so it would be impossible for them to know the different capabilities of the 4 minor layers within the Genesis tier. Ling Han closed his eyes, letting his spirit come in touch with this world, comprehending the power of regulation. A cultivator of the Shattering Void tier would have such preliminary qualification. Moreover, he had also refined a little demonic chi of the Azura Demon Emperor, and attained some power of regulation of the Netherworld. Although the powers of regulation of the 2 realms were completely different, at least they were on the same level. Inevitably, there ought to be some basis for reference. Suddenly, he was struck with an idea. What if I could master the power of regulation of the 2 realms, Immortal Realm and Netherworld, at the same time? One hand is yin and the other hand is yang, like the opposing force between heaven and earth. Who could block a strike like this? But then, he immediately shook his head. He hadn't any comprehension of the Immortal Realm's power of regulation, but what about the Netherworld? He was only now passively mastering traces of it, and still very far from reaching the level of minor accomplishment. Unless there is a chance to go to the Netherworld. This wasn't impossible. There were 2 weak spots in the barrier of the Immortal Realm. If the Netherworld could storm in here, then the Immortal Realm could also charge out of there. This would require extremely powerful strength. It would be akin to suicide if I go over now. Besides, I haven't even grasped the power of regulation of the Immortal Realm. Why bother to think about the Netherworld? He laughed in spite of himself, thinking that he was really too greedy. A period of 2 to 3 days passed by quietly. Unexpectedly, there was no movement in the Luo clan. Perhaps they knew that Ling Han would participate in the assessment of the Northern Institution, and planned to settle the disagreement at that time. On the contrary, Li Weiwei seemed to be hooked onto Ling Han. She would come to make a fuss at least every alternate day, but would always leave in anger. She simply wouldn't learn her lesson, and would come to be angered again the next day. 10 days passed by quickly. Ling Han stopped cultivating and opened up his right palm. There were traces of interweaving golden light on it. That was the power of regulation, but it was just too weak. Limited to the realm, whether it was the Shattering Void tier, Mountain River tier, or other levels, there was a limit to the degree of comprehension of the power of regulation. Now there was still a very huge gap between Ling Han's current level and the highest limit of the Shattering Void tier. If this limit was compared to 100, then he had not even reached 1 yet. I may appear to have reached the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier, but there is still a lot of room for improvement. It's truly unsuitable to charge towards immortal level. Just by surveying the immortal level, one could already tell which among those like Xiao Miaoyan and Wu Gaoyuan had not already reached the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier. Their battle prowess had also reached 18 stars, but why didn't they charge towards the immortal level? It wasn't because they weren't able to, but rather because it wasn't the right time yet. Charging forward then would affect their battle prowess in the immortal level. Who didn't want to become a 1-star, 2-star, or even 3-star or 4-star genius, or even barely limited to the legendary 5-star genius? Blockhead! Blockhead! Li Weiwei rushed over energetically. The admission examination for the Northern Institution has begun. Quickly, quickly! I must defeat you today and make you admit defeat. Ling Han gave a wry smile and said, "Okay, lead the way." Chapter 890. Gathering of Geniuses. Although there wasn't any fanfare accompanying the left minister's fourth young miss when she went out, the moment when Ling Han and Li Weiwei stepped out the residence, four ordinary-looking men immediately followed behind them. They were the bodyguards whom the left minister had arranged for Li Weiwei. Was an elite cultivator who had attained the level of perfection in the mountain river tier. Within the entire chaotic star's majestic empire, there was scarcely any person with the capability to make these elites their bodyguards. Given the strength of Ling Han and Li Weiwei, it was naturally impossible for them to realize that these four elites were following behind them. They were heading eastwards to the Scarlet Heaven Academy, which was situated on the east side of the imperial capital, close to the city gates. They took a ride on the left minister's carriage. On the way, pedestrians stepped aside to let them pass, and even soldiers patrolling the streets stopped to salute, paying their respects. It could be seen that the left minister had widespread, powerful influence. In a small world, the spirit tool for flying had only one purposito save the energy of the cultivator. Its actual speed wasn't faster than that of martial artists, or even fast at all. But in the immortal realm, most of the vehicle's speed was faster than the cultivators themselves. Not to mention the god tool for flying, only someone with the power or level of strength as high as the left ministers could possess one. Hence, despite the imperial capital being outrageously vast, they arrived at the north gate of the academy in about 2 hours. Although there was only one Scarlet Heaven Academy, it was made up of 4 institutions, which had their own respective entrances. For example, the Northern Institution would use the North Gate. Generally, students from the respective institutions wouldn't visit other institutions. The competition amongst the 4 institutions was extremely fierce. If a student from the Northern Institution was to trespass into the territory of the Eastern Institution, he would definitely be given a good thrashing. At this moment, there was a lot of people already waiting at the gate. Although the Scarlet Heaven Academy would recruit students every 5 years, this majestic empire was truly massive. Every time, only a handful out of thousands would get accepted as students. The elimination rate was astonishing. Therefore, the first stage was naturally filtering the people. Those who appear to have too poor an aptitude would be eliminated immediately so as not to waste time. The symbol of the left minister was really useful. Although the carriage itself could not go inside the academy, they were able to cut the queue and cross through the masses of people as vast as the ocean. They didn't have to waste the slightest bit of time in entering the academy grounds. Why are they allowed to cut the queue? That's right, we have all waited for several hours. Completely unfair. At this time, many young candidates raised their voices incessantly in anger, full of vigor. A guard at the academy sneered coldly and said, "If your father is the left minister, then naturally you can also jump the queue." Once this sentence had been said, everyone became silent. Left minister. How powerful a figure was he? The 4 bodyguards from the left minister's residence did not enter the academy, but dispersed, leaving only one person to keep watch near one entrance of the academy lest the naughty 4th young miss sneaked out. She had a history of committing such acts. After the 2 entered the academy's grounds, Li Weiwei was still leading the way. It was obviously not her first time here, as she navigated her way with ease. After a while of walking, she brought Ling Han to a public square. This was actually the center of the Scarlet Heaven Academy, wherein a white tower with 9 floors stood. A 9-story tower again. Humph! Small tower grumbled in a dissatisfied tone. How dares it imitate me? Destroy it! Ling Han couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. He said, although it is also a 9-story tower, but it's white in color, which is very different from you. In any case, I don't like the sight of it. Destroy it. Small tower was obviously extremely tsundere. Don't mess around, this is the place that the Scarlet Heaven Academy will use for the assessment. If you want me to go destroy it, putting aside the question of whether I have such ability or not, even if I can, how many pieces do you think I will be chopped into? Ling Han said with a smile. The assessment of the Scarlet Heaven Academy was actually quite simple. One would enter the tower, and those who could climb to the 3rd floor would pass the assessment and be accepted as students of the academy. Naturally, the higher one could climb, the better the score would be. The top 10 students would receive focused training by the academy, especially the top 3, whose rewards would be a lot more. Can you guess who will get first place this time? It goes without saying that it must be Luo Ba. Not only is he one of the 3 elites of the younger generation in the imperial capital, he also has the most outstanding talent. I'm optimistic that he can get the first place this time. Hee, you already said that there are 3 elites. Have you forgotten about Ji Yuner and Lin Yu? Yes, I am more optimistic about Ji Yuner. Just her being one of the 3 great beauties in the imperial capital is enough for me to support her. I am more optimistic about Lin Yu. Big brother Lin is a loyal friend, even willing to sacrifice himself. There was a lot of ongoing discussions. Despite there being different views, everyone had no doubt that Luo Ba, Lin Yu, and Ji Yuner would most likely advance and break through amidst the fierce competition. At the very least, the top 3 spots would definitely be occupied by them, the only suspense being who would get first place. You people are really too narrow-sighted. Are there no geniuses outside of the imperial capital? Some people argued, unconvinced. Ha 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 ha. This triggered hoots of laughter from the crowd. You are really naive. Do you know what kind of place the imperial capital is? The best of the empire are converging here. Forget the others, and just refer to elites of the heavenly body tier. Where else can you find these elites other than in the imperial capital? They are all similarly nurturing their juniors. Do you think that those of the heavenly body tier would lose to others at the sun, moon, or mountain river tier? In martial arts, a difference in level by a minor layer is the gap between heaven and earth. The amount of resources possessed by the clans in the imperial capital is beyond your imagination. Although talent is important, there are many treasures in the world that can improve one's physique and battle prowess. No matter how you put it, one's background is the most important. Aha! Everyone nodded and agreed on this point. Talent could make up for background to a certain extent, but the problem was that those people with a background would also have talent. How could one compare? It would be futile to put in tremendous effort while other people also work hard. Observing the scene from one corner of the square, an elderly man in grey robes, who had his arms crossed behind him, said softly, "Everyone thinks that the trio of Luo, Lin, and Ji can get the first place in this assessment. Haofei, do you have the confidence to defeat these 3 people?" Please be assured, great-grandfather. I have been working hard for more than 10 years, bearing with loneliness and austerity. Wasn't all of that for today, to shock the world with an amazing feat? Beside the old man was a young man who appeared to be no more than 20 years old, with a cultivation of the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier. Ha ha, then great-grandfather shall be waiting to see you shine. The grey-robed old man laughed heartily. Logically, parents weren't allowed to enter the academy's grounds, but this didn't prevent some with certain privileges. For example, if the left minister wished to enter the academy, who would dare to stop him? However, the higher their position, the more they would pay attention to this aspect, and not easily give their political opponents a point that could be used to attack themselves. Therefore, few of them actually appeared. The young man clenched his fists and said, "Just you wait, today will be my day. Everyone can only look up to me, Chang Haofei, from beneath my feet." In another corner, a young man with bare arms was concentrating on wiping a long saber. His eyes were extremely focused. Occasionally, when he raised his head, his gaze sweeping across the square would make others nearby go soft in the knees. One should know that all the others were similarly cultivators of the Shattering Void tier. Having the ability to make others cower with just a glance. How strong was this person? "The first place shall belong to me, Ma Xing." Chapter 891. A very slight effort. "Let's begin," an important person of the academy said. There were bright images of a sun and moon behind him, which meant that he was a powerful elite of the sun-moon tier. Though he was only in the minor levels, this kind of elite was more than enough to gain the admiration of others. After entering into a mortal level, every minor level was akin to tall mountain that people would exclaim at, and there were pitifully few that could conquer one mountain after another. The minor level of the sun-moon tier could be considered standing on the 5th tall peak, and this was an extremely tall peak. Climbing the previous 4 mountains could still be considered easy, but if one wanted to conquer this one, it was as difficult as touching the sky itself. Everyone held their breath, not even daring to breathe too loudly. Even if many here had come from prominent background, respect for strength was basic manners, and only spoiled young masters would behave arrogantly, knowing they had the support of their clan and background. The White Star Tower can accommodate 10,000 people at once. Line up and enter in turn. Once full, the tool spirit will naturally stop others from entering, this important person said. Make the most of your time and try to complete the assessment by today, everyone. Yes. Everyone could not help but nod. Influenced by the aura of an elite, their emotions were uncontrollably affected as well. Everyone arranged themselves into lines, and entered one by one that 9-storied white tower. It was obviously a treasured spirit tool that possessed an independent space. Otherwise, it was definitely impossible that 10,000 people could enter at the same time to undergo the assessment. However, this test was conducted really quickly. Without waiting for all 10,000 people to enter, there were people coming out already. The pace of exchange had even caught up to the speed of people entering into the tower. Every time someone passed through the test on each floor, this treasured tower would correspondingly make that floor light up. The results would be recorded by the tool spirit. No one could cheat. If anyone really wanted to fool this god tool, that was actually more difficult than passing through this 9-story tower. Those that were determined to aim for good results all tacitly stayed at the back, wanting to appear on stage as the climax. Blockhead, Luo Ba is right over there. Go and greet him. Li Weiwei urged. Is it really all right for you to act like that? Ling Han shook his head and chuckled in spite of himself. This willful and unruly young miss was really bearing a grudge against him, tirelessly wanting him to be defeated. He was naturally not going to go over, but the Luo brothers had also spotted him. Luo Lai immediately looked furious, and spoke a few words lowly to the ear of a young man beside him. The two of them then walked over. The other person was naturally Luo Ba. Now, this person did not just have an empty reputation. His body was as tall and sturdy like a tyrannical king's, and his aura was even more incredible. There were halos of divine light flickering around him as if he was the son of a god. Greetings, fourth young miss. The Luo brothers paid their respects to Li Weiwei simultaneously. Li Weiwei nodded back in an aloof manner. She was the daughter of the left minister, and the descendants of noble background in the imperial capital that could stand equal with her could be counted on one hand. Luo Ba then turned to look at Ling Han and said calmly, "This must be Brother Ling who has come from a small world, right?" "I am Ling Han," Ling Han replied, similarly very calm. "Thank you for your guidance of my younger brother," Luo Ba said darkly, flames of rage jumping in his eyes. Although the Luo clan was not in the top tier of noble clans in the imperial capital, they were not an existence that could be humiliated by the likes of a lowly commoner from a small world, either. Ling Han chuckled and replied, "It was only a very slight effort, don't mention it." Fuck. The Luo brothers were both thrown into a towering rage. They were absolutely not thanking him, all right? Luo Ba was obviously making an ironic remark, and you actually took it seriously. Luo Ba could not help but humph and said, "No one can humiliate members of my Luo clan." At first, he had wanted to beat down on Ling Han verbally, but he'd never imagined that Ling Han was not the type to react as expected, causing the strike that he delivered to have no effect at all. On the contrary, it was him who felt very displeased. Hence, he directly revealed his violent nature. "Oh, you want a fight?" Ling Han asked, smiling. In the shattering void tier, there was really no one he was afraid of, not even the Empress of Chaotic Star's majestic empire. Let's see if he wouldn't thrash her to the point of submitting and calling him big brother if she suppressed her cultivation level to the shattering void tier. Fight, fight. Li Weiwei, meanwhile, immediately began to wave her small fists around, wishing for the whole world to be in chaos. Luo Ba sneered coldly and said, "You are really quite crafty. This is the Scarlet Heaven Academy. Who would dare to be impudent here? However, even if you enter into the academy, I will still challenge you, and if you are unable to enroll into the academy, then you're dead." Ling Han rubbed his chin with a smile and said, "Is it really all right for you to threaten me like this? Aren't you afraid that you are not my match, and instead will be beaten into begging for mercy from me?" "Ha ha." Luo Ba laughed coldly. What a joke. He was one of the well-known figures among the younger generation of the Luo clan, and had extremely high expectations placed on him. How could he possibly be defeated by a lowly commoner from a small world? If it were not for the fact that he wanted to attempt to reach the highest battle prowess of 20 stars of Shattering Void tier, with the resources of the Luo clan, he would have long since been able to advance into the immortal level. but for a brighter future. He would not attempt to break through into the immortal level before he reached 100 years of age, unless he could reach 20 stars of battle prowess first. That was a very common understanding. Everyone would attempt to reach the highest limit of battle prowess of 20 stars of Shattering Void tier before they were 100 years old. They were still young anyways. And if they broke through after reaching 20 stars of Shattering Void tier, they would be able to become a 1-star genius and possess the super battle prowess that could allow them to cross over a sub-minor level in battle to fight a stronger opponent. "You just wait and see," he said word by word. "Do you have a stutter?" Ling Han said, making a pretense of being worried. "How pitiful. The younger brother is an idiot, and the elder brother is a stutterer." Sigh. The Luo brothers were both enraged, and felt an uncontrollable urge to rush over and make a move on Ling Han. They just barely managed to control this urge. If they rashly made a move in the academy, especially on such an important day like today, then it would be useless even if they had the backing of the Luo clan. The result would be a definite expulsion from the academy, and them being eternally banned from entering it again. "Let's go, we're going in to take the assessment." Luo Ba held onto his brother so that the latter would not rashly make a move and in the end cause himself great trouble. Power was the rule here. He wanted to climb to the 5th floor of the tall tower, and make everyone know that he, Luo Ba, was the only ruler of the younger generation. After a while, the 4th level lit up. If they could advance one more step and reach the 5th level, they would have hopes of becoming a 1-star genius. Is there something like that? Of course. What do you think this assessment is for? This is a test of your future potential. The 5th level means you can become a 1-star genius, the 6th floor means 2-star, the 7th level means 3-star, the 8th means 4-star, and the 9th level, 5-star. Of course, this is only potential, and not definite. It will still depend on your own individual effort. Thus, those that had not passed the assessment previously can also come back to participate as long as they are no older than 100 years. After all, your hard work can produce a change in yourself. Furthermore, it is also possible that you encounter some kind of fateful opportunity too, letting you pass next time. I see. The rookies all nodded, and looked at that 9-storied white tower simultaneously. Although the 3rd level would light up occasionally, it was the first time for the 4th level to light up. Who is that fierce? Who else? Didn't you all see Luo Ba go in? Hiss, so it was him. No wonder he could pass the 4th level. I don't know if he will be able to make the 5th level light up as well. That's a bit difficult, but it is not impossible. Just as the spectators were talking, the 5th floor of the tower lit up. All of a sudden, a stir was created among the crowd. Chapter 892. 5th Level Genius. 5th Level. As expected of Luo Ba, someone who is highly likely to become a 1-star genius. A genius difficult to encounter even in 100 years. Everyone exclaimed in shock, their admiration and envy clear in their words and expressions. This was the best result so far. Hey, do you think that Luo Ba has a chance of advancing further, passing through the 6th level and becoming a 2-star genius? It'd be difficult. The gap between 1-star and 2-star genius is the gap of a sub-minor level, and apparently, this kind of genius would only appear once every 1,000 years. It's hard to say. After all, we are the chaotic star's majestic empire. Our territory is too vast, and the number of geniuses that appear is naturally much, much higher. In other royal empires, there may appear a few 1-star geniuses in one go, but for us, there can possibly appear a 2-star genius. Though that's true, it is still more difficult for a 2-star genius to appear. As far as I know, presently, there is less than 100 2-star geniuses in the whole Scarlet Heaven Academy, right? Even though this figure looked very big, what kind of entity was the whole of the Scarlet Heaven Academy? It was a place that had brought together all the geniuses of the whole chaotic star's majestic empire in the several thousand years past and present. Going by such calculations, 100 was really actually not that many. Let's see. Everyone was staring at the 9-storied white tower. If the 6th level of the tower also lit up, it meant that Luo Ba might become a 2-star genius in future. But after a long time, the 6th level still did not light up, and Luo Ba had already walked out of the tower. He had not been able to pass through the 6th level. This caused the higher-ups of the academy to feel slightly regretful. At first, they had looked very optimistically on this young man, but Luo Ba was ultimately unable to perform a miracle. But this was normal. Two-star geniuses were really much too rare. Even with the environment that was the chaotic star's majestic empire, at most only one had appeared in this decade. Furthermore, it was not impossible for Luo Ba to advance further in the future and become a two-star genius. Of course, it was also possible that he might not even reach the level of a one-star genius. This assessment was only a test of potential, after all. Very good, very good. I asked Lord Tool Spirit just now. Though Luo Ba couldn't pass through the 6th level, he has still completed the tests on the first 2 stages of the 6th floor. This result is extremely good, and in previous years, he would have been able to rank in the top 3. Even if he got the first place, it would not be strange. Ho ho, we finally got a good sprout. Several elites of the northern institutions spoke amongst themselves. They could finally breathe in relief. Obviously, the more talented and excellent the students they enrolled were, the more they could hold their heads high in the institution. With how dazzling the spotlight was on Luo Ba now, it made the other geniuses restless. They all entered into the tower to undergo the assessment in turns, and all of a sudden, there were considerably many more people coming out of the 4th floor, but Luo Ba was still the only one who could pass through to the 5th level. Blockhead, are you feeling the pressure yet? Li Weiwei elbowed Ling Han and said, as expected of a genius that can stand on the same level as Big Sister Yun, he actually managed to pass through the 5th level. Sigh, I can only pass through to the 4th level at most. Her expression was filled with disappointment. Although she had long since known that she was not as talented as the top-tier geniuses, she still felt down now that things had come to a head. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, then just wait and see how I will sweep aside all geniuses and proudly claim the first place. Show off. Li Weiwei rolled her eyes exaggeratedly and said, I'll go first. However, since you speak so confidently, then you'll be the last to go on stage. Let me see how you amaze everyone, all right? Fine. Ling Han nodded. Looking at this rate, the assessment could definitely be completed today. Then, it was going to be a wait in any case, so there was no difference between going in earlier or later. Li Weiwei ran into the tower, and spent about 30 minutes' time before she finally completed her assessment. The longer one took, the better the results should be. Indeed, she had passed the 4th level, but lost on the tactic stage of the 5th level. There was nothing to be done about it. Spirit, and even talent itself, could be boosted with treasures, but combat tactics required understanding through personal experience. Look, the 5th level has lit up again. Exclamations rang out. Everyone raised their heads, and saw that the 5th level had indeed lit up. A sliver of darkness instantly appeared on Luo Ba's face. A person that had passed through the 5th level could possibly become a threat to him, which made him feel much pressure. Brother, don't worry. You have passed the first 2 stages. As long as this person can't pass through the 6th level, then he would only be on the same level as you at most. Moreover, in my opinion, it is extremely likely for that person to be disqualified in the first 2 stages ahead, Luo Lai said. Luo Ba nodded slowly. He was very confident in himself, but still fixed his eyes on the entrance of the 9-storied tower, hoping that he could see that person exit quickly. The earlier he came out, the faster it implied he had been disqualified, and naturally the smaller the possibility he had of passing through the first 2 stages ahead. Quite some time had passed, yet the 6th level ultimately still did not light up. A tall young man walked out, slovenly in dress and manner, unrestrained and careless. So it turned out to be Brother Lin Yu. No wonder he could pass through the 5th level. Who knows how he compares against Luo Ba? Humph, Brother Lin would definitely not be worse off than Luo Ba. Many spoke up. They were very much convinced of this Lin Yu's ability, and every one of them gave off a feeling cordial familiarity. Everyone knew that Lin Yu was loyal, and as long as you managed to get his approval, then he would think of a way to help you no matter how big the problem you encountered was. In the young generation of the imperial capital, who would not give a big thumbs up and call out, Brother Lin, when they spoke of Lin Yu? Thus, when they compared Lin Yu and Luo Ba together, it became very obvious whom everyone was supportive of. It definitely had to be Lin Yu. Luo Ba could not help but humph. His expression even darker. Although he clearly knew that Lin Yu's results were the same as his at most, he still felt very displeased. Here's another 5-story genius. Unfortunately, he has similarly fallen at the 3rd stage of the 6th level, if not, sigh. The elites of the Northern Institution all felt very pleased, but slightly regretful as well. After all, Lin Yu had just been a bit away from passing the 6th level. In the crowd, that young man with bare forearms jumped down from a huge rock. Showing a smile of confidence, he strode towards the 9-storied tower. He was really forceful, and as he walked, the people in his surroundings would all give away. Some had even flopped down to sit on the ground as if they were mortals that had come up against a fierce beast, so terrified that their hair stood on ends. Who's this person? What a frightening aura! I know, he's an amazing genius from the wild mountains in the south. He just arrived in the imperial capital a few days ago. He fought a successive 13 battles in the ranking battles of the battle arena, gaining a successive 13 victories. What? He actually managed to win 13 successive matches in the battle arena. Then he would at least be able to become a 1-star genius in future, right? According to the rules of the ranking battles in the battle arena, winning 10 matches consecutively is the standard of a 1-star genius. Then had he lost in the 14th match? No. He just did not choose to continue fighting. Why? He said he was hungry and didn't want to fight anymore. Pooh! Once these words were heard, it instantly caused a great many to choke with laughter. His reason was actually that, was this guy a glutton? He really proved himself as one who had come out of the wild mountains. However, this guy's aura is really quite scary. Even if I am the same as him in ability, merely standing in front of him to battle, I would only be able to exhibit 10% of my battle prowess at most. Not fighting, yet he can scare off enemy troops. This is the appearance of a natural ruler. After laughing, everyone's expressions became serious. This person was very frightening. What's his name? Ma Xing. Chapter 893. The King, Ma Xing. As Ma Xing passed, everyone gave way. Only a few could stand up to the pressure he exuded. Even the elites of the academy nodded in approval. This young man strode boldly forward. He had the appearance of a king. In the immortal realm, the so-called kings were not those human cultivators that had formed qi, but those formidable characters that possessed outstanding presence. Otherwise, wouldn't everyone be able to become a king, and cause the word king to become much too cheap? Yet this Ma Xing completely deserved the name of king. Without battling, his presence was enough to subdue enemy troops. His was really a figure that would be rare even in 100,000 years. I never thought that our institution actually managed to receive this kind of student. Ever since Hai Feng left the Northern Institution, we have never had this kind of king-tier student anymore. There has been a lapse of over 1,000 years. On the other hand, the Eastern, Southern and Western institutions respectively have received a king-tier student in these few hundred years, and have left us far behind. Even if this kid can't pass through the White Star Tower's test, I will still take him as my personal disciple. Ho ho, how could a king-tier student possibly be unable to pass through the first 3 levels of assessments? Old Zhu, you are bearing malicious intentions, wanting to snatch this king-tier student for yourself. Fuck, am I that kind of person? You obviously are. When the exchange between these elites was heard by the people nearby and the news was spread out, a stir was created in the crowd. A king-tier student. This was too shocking. Even with how big the territory of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire was, this kind of talent would probably appear only once every 100 years. It was extremely rare, and comparable to a 3-star genius. Ma Xing entered into the 9-storied tower. Very quickly, the 3rd level lit up. There were very many people who could pass through the first 2 levels, and it had practically ensured that the first 2 levels were constantly lit, but the 3rd level was a different story. It would only flicker occasionally. But after only a while, the 4th level lit up as well. Would he be able to reach the 5th level? Everyone felt curious. The aura of a king was not among the assessment criteria of the White Star Tower, so it could not possibly gain him extra credit. Thus, whether or not you were a king had absolutely no effect on the question of whether you could pass through the White Star Tower. If Ma Xing could pass through the 5th level with his own individual ability, then added with his king's qi, he would be able to reach the battle prowess of a 2-star genius, and in the future, he might even still have room for improvement and reach the level of a 3-star, or even 4-star genius. Do you all know that the left and right ministers as well as the 7 generals of our empire all possess king's qi, and they themselves are 4-star geniuses? What? Everyone was astonished by this explosive revelation, and grabbed their heads, exclaiming their shock. What, is it real? Then wouldn't that be comparable to 5-star geniuses? A super existence that only exists in legends. Naturally. Do you know how many millennia those elites have cultivated for? Your clan's ancestor hadn't even been born, and these few have already began cultivating. Apparently, the youngest, Lord Left Minister, is already 80 million years old this year. 80? Over 80 million years old? Are you sure you did not speak wrongly? It is not 80,000 years, or 800,000 years old. Of course, in the past, which among the left and right ministers and the 7 generals was not a forceful ruler of a region. It was only when Her Majesty, the Empress, appeared out of nowhere and swept aside all opposition in the world with her invincibility that the lords were all gathered under her banner. Hiss say, how many star genius is Her Majesty the Empress then? I don't know. There has never been anyone who has seen Her Majesty move, because there is absolutely no need for that. That's right. Her Majesty is the greatest beauty in the world. Who would be so cruel to make a move on her the moment they saw her? Shoo, don't speak rashly, or you may lose your head at any moment. To dare to disrespect the Empress, are you tired of living? I was just complimenting Her Majesty. Just at this moment, the 5th level of the White Star Tower lit up. All of a sudden, a stir was created among the crowd. The 5th level meant that he had the potential of a 1-star genius, and added with his solid king's might, Ma Xing was practically sure to become a 2-star genius in future. Ha 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 ha. The elites of the Northern Institution were all laughing very delightedly, feeling that they had finally gotten a hold of a treasure this time round. This was a definite piece of excellent jade, and with careful carving, it was possible for him to even become a 3-star or 4-star genius. Meanwhile, Luo Ba's expression darkened. Even if Ma Xing failed immediately, the concentrated attention that the other would receive in the academy would definitely exceed his. This made him feel as if he had been slapped. In another corner, an old man said, Haofei, you've encountered a rival. Chang Haofei stared at the 9-storied tower and said, Great-grandfather, I have the confidence to pass through the 6th level. If you can become a 2-star genius, then you would not be weaker than him. The old man's attention focused. Do you have the confidence? Full confidence. Chang Haofei gripped his fists. He had worked hard at cultivation for more than 10 years. Wasn't it all for him to amaze everyone with a single feat on this day and shock everyone? On another side, Li Weiwei was also looking very astonished. She then tossed a disdainful glance at Ling Han as she said, Blockhead, now do you still dare to be confident? Why would I not dare? Ling Han asked, smiling. He is a 1-star genius, and has king's qi as well, so he would at least become a 2-star genius. Li Weiwei looked at him as if she was staring at an idiot. Yet Ling Han crossed his arms behind his back and said, I have said so before. I am invincible, and it applies to everyone. Ayaya, how could this guy be so puffed up? He was obviously a country bumpkin that had just come from a small world, so why was his confidence level so sky-high? Li Weiwei felt as if she was about to be driven mad, but looking at how self-confident Ling Han looked, she could not help but become a bit absent-minded. She had to admit that when men showed off this kind of invincible presence, it was still extremely attractive for women. Pay. I was not moved in the slightest. He is nothing but an idiot. Li Weiwei quickly spat, and threw that little bit of fluster that had just arisen out of her thoughts. Just at this moment, gasps of shock rang out. The 6th level lit up as well. Heavens! He himself is a 2-star genius, and added with his king's qi, Ma Xing is comparable to a 3-star genius. He is definitely the most outstanding student in the last 100 years. No. There are not that few 2-star geniuses, but added with his king's qi and limited to the Northern Institution, it would be difficult to meet one such as he in 1,000 years. Everyone exploded from surprise. They had witnessed the birth of a king. Luo Ba's fists cracked from clenching them too tightly. Ma Xing's strength and talent caused endless killing intent to arise with him. If he killed the other, then he would still be the first place. Cheng Haofei similarly felt as if he had been dealt a heavy blow. He had been confident he could pass through the 6th level of the White Star Tower, but that would only be the same as the other party. If one added in King's Qi, he was far too inferior. Thankfully, Ma Xing did not continue to shock others, and very quickly came out of the tower. He had failed on the 2nd stage of the 7th level. This result once again caused a stir. The elites of the Northern Institution had practically confirmed that Ma Xing was going to hold the first place in the assessment this time, and fought to extend an olive branch to him, wanting to take him in as their personal disciple. Ma Xing did not accept, appearing to be extremely proud and aloof, yet this made the elites even more pleased with him. What future elite would not be arrogant and obstinate in nature? Without a little temper, would you have the nerve to call yourself an elite? Should be about time, I should go in as well, Ling Han said. Chapter 894. Entering the Tower. After Ma Xing came out, those that had not yet undergone the assessment became gradually fewer and fewer. Those that did not pass were directly sent out of the academy, and those that had passed stood on another side of the square. Together, there were only over 300 of them, and compared to the number that had come to register for the enrollment, this number was pitifully small. There were about 1,000 people that had yet to take the assessment, and standing in the massive square, they seemed odd. Li Weiwei's status was special, which was why she managed to come back after taking the assessment. She heard Ling Han was about to take the assessment, and could not help but become excited. She said, go on, I can no longer wait to humiliate you. You will not have that opportunity. Ling Han smiled, appearing to be very confident. Tisk! Li Weiwei scoffed. This guy had just ascended from a small world, so he could not have come into contact with the White Star Tower before, and thus absolutely would not know what the assessment inside the tower was like. Where had he gotten such overwhelming confidence from? Big Sister Yun. Her eyes were sharp, and she spotted a young woman that had just arrived in the square. She immediately raced over. This woman was dressed in a long snow-white skirt, and aside from a hairpin, there was no other adornment on her. This gave her a kind of natural beauty, unearthly and elegant, like a fairy that was above the common populace. Wearing any additional ornaments was unnecessary, and would only damage her quiet and exquisite presence. She was Ji Yuner, one of the 3 great beauties of the imperial capital, and was also one of the 3 great elites of the younger generation. She had enough admirers to line up around the colossal imperial capital 3 times. Although she did not have as strong a background as Li Weiwei's, her suitors definitely were not few. Ji Yuner nodded and asked, Weiwei, have you passed the assessment? N. Li Weiwei nodded. Big Sister Yun, why are you so late? I thought you had changed your mind and planned to wait another 5 years to take the assessment for the Eastern Institution. Ji Yuner's slender brows wrinkled unwittingly, but they immediately smoothened out, and she said, I already agreed to take the assessment with you, so how could I possibly break my word? All right, let's not talk now. I'm going to take the assessment. Okay. Li Weiwei suddenly waved her hand and declared loudly, Big Sister Yun, go on, you definitely have to beat that show-off of a blockhead. Ji Yuner naturally did not know who this blockhead was. She walked elegantly and naturally towards the White Star Tower as if she was a cloud, unmarred by dirt, touching and graceful, causing many who saw her to turn heated gazes on her. Ma Xing's eyes lit up as well, and he revealed an interested expression. The corners of his mouth lifted up slightly, with a slight demonic feel to it. In the corner, Cheng Haofei was also walking towards the White Star Tower. It was about time. If he still did not move, then that was not showing off anymore. Rather, he would miss the assessment this time entirely. This was the last batch and at the same time also the highest quality batch. The 3rd level lit up repeatedly, and even the 4th level would light up every now and then, abruptly increasing the number of those who had passed the assessment by another 100 more. However, the 5th level adamantly did not light up. Ling Han walked into the tower, and everyone beside him immediately disappeared. He no longer heard any background noise, either. He had entered into an independent space. Ahead of him, a stone chamber suddenly appeared. There was only a simple stone table, and a jade plaque lay on the table. The first level, the first stage, a test of comprehension. A voice rang out, so cold that there was not a hint of emotion in it. The tool spirit of the White Star Tower. A god tool was a god tool, after all. Aside from Small Tower, Ling Han had never heard another tool spirit speak. Che, the lowest grade god tool, not even fit to pick up my shoes, Small Tower declared in a very tsundere manner. Ling Han paid it no attention and asked, "How will we be tested?" There is a section of a cultivation technique etched on that jade plaque. You have to decode it in 30 minutes time to pass the test, and the shorter the time you take, the better your result, the tool spirit answered coldly. In this god tool, it could split itself into millions, and it would be easy for it to communicate with over 10,000 people at the same time. Ling Han could not help his curiosity and questioned, "Is there a record to be broken? And will there be any reward for breaking the record?" "There is a record to be broken, but there is no reward. Your name will only be etched here," the tool spirit replied. "There are 10 names etched on the wall in front of you, and they are the 10 people who have taken the shortest amount of time. If someone afterwards surpasses their record, a name will be replaced." Ling Han shook his head. Then there was no point to break the record. "You may begin," the tool spirit said calmly. If this had been an immortal level elite, he would have long lost patience with Ling Han's incessant questions and want to beat someone up, but it merely followed a predefined pattern, and did not experience the slightest rise or fall of emotion. Only now did Ling Han walk towards the stone table and sit on the ground. He picked up the jade plaque, and inserted his divine sense within. Instantly, multiple ancient letters popped out and churned around in his mind's eye. This kind of inherited cultivation technique would enter directly into the mind, and could not be described in written word or spoken speech. Only when one really comprehended it would he be able to give a rough description of it. Take note, it was only a rough description, and not the cultivation technique itself. A cultivation technique was a serious business, and there was no room for the slightest error. Ling Han closed his eyes slightly, and placed the jade plaque down as he said, "This is a claw technique, but it is badly damaged. There are only 2.5 moves left, and there isn't a complete set of route map for the movement of origin power either. With regards to moves, it should be like this." He gestured a few times, showing off the 2.5 moves of the claw technique. Because it did not involve any use of origin power, it was naturally without difficulty. The tool spirit paused, then said, "Though this martial arts technique is very low grade, your comprehension level is very high. You may be ranked in the 13th place, but cannot leave your name. HM." At first, Ling Han was completely uninterested in breaking the record, but when he heard that his speed could only rank 13th, he could not help but feel a competitive spirit rising up in him. He could use this place to compare himself with his predecessors. The Scarlet Heaven Academy had been established for millions of years. How many elite geniuses had once appeared here? Many of them were currently the pillars of support for the Empire. "You may proceed to the second stage," the tool spirit said. The wall ahead suddenly vanished, revealing a corridor. Ling Han walked over, and saw that at the end of the corridor, there was another stone chamber. Similarly, it only had a stone table, with a jade plaque laid on it. Did he have to take the test again? "You have a maximum of 3 chances to use your spiritual energy to shatter this jade plaque." The tool spirit's voice rang out again. This time, it was a test of spiritual strength and tenacity. If the spirit was not strong enough, it would be equivalent to the punches one delivered lacking weight, and without enough tenacity, it was as if one's fists were made out of tofu. No matter how much strength there was, one would still be shattered by his own blows. From the shattering void tier, cultivators would begin to cultivate their spirits. This was in preparation for advancing into the immortal level. Li Weiwei and the others had been nurturing their spirits with various treasures since childhood, so their spirits were naturally incredibly strong and resilient. This was also the reason why Li Weiwei was not optimistic about Ling Han. They had much too vast a gap between their starting lines. Perhaps Ling Han could pass through the first 3 levels, but it would be as difficult as touching the skies for him to be able to attain a good result. What degree of power the wealth of the various great forces reached was something primarily exhibited in this area. For example, The reason why Li Weiwei failed on the 5th level was not because her spirit was not strong enough, nor was her talent inadequate, but rather the fact that she had much too little combat experience. Ling Han smiled slightly. How could his spirit lose to these members of the younger generation of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire? Chapter 895. Maximum Strength of the Shattering Void Tier. Ling Han looked at the jade plaque, and with a thought, a stream of spiritual energy surged out, heading towards the jade plaque. This was strength of the spirit. When the spirit was strong to a certain extent, a mere thought would be able to move the regulations of the heavens and earth, and shatter even a colossal planet. Of course, this was something that could only be done by an ultimate elite of the Genesis tier, and Ling Han was still who knew how far away from that step. The jade plaque immediately shattered into pieces. Ling Han smiled slightly. He was still very far away from being able to destroy a planet with a single thought, but how difficult would it be to shatter a jade plaque? Furthermore, he merely delivered a careless trike, and had not used sword heart. Otherwise, his spiritual energy would be even more frightening. This was because he had drunk the reincarnation tea. Even if it was just a single sip, his present spiritual strength would definitely not be weaker than any other shattering void tier cultivators in this world. I have not yet said what range of distance you have to be in to make your move, the tool spirit suddenly said. Ling Han gave an ah and said, Is it too near? Then just place another jade plaque. No, you have passed, the tool spirit said. According to the rolls, you can be as close as 3 feet away to blast out your spiritual energy. Ling Han could not help but shed cold sweat. Why did he feel that this tool spirit carried a bit of the feeling that Small Tower gave off as well? It actually had a cold sense of humor as well. Hey, how could it compare to me? Small Tower meanwhile was acting tsundra again. It disliked other tower-shaped spirit tools the most. You can advance to the 3rd stage, the tool spirit said. The wall once again disappeared, and yet another corridor appeared. Ling Han walked along the corridor to the end, and saw that there was yet another stone chamber ahead of him. However, in comparison to the previous 2 chambers, this one was 100 times bigger. Rather than calling it a stone chamber, it would be more appropriate to call it an arena. Block 10 moves from him and you can pass, the tool spirit said. Starlight flickered and condensed into a human figure. This was a human figure made out of spots of light, and one could vaguely distinguish that it was the image of a man. He had a tall, slender figure, but his exact features could not be clearly seen. Young man, make your move, the starlit man said, his voice clear and loud, possessing a kind of forcefulness that could cause others to yield. Ling Han could not help but be surprised and said, Why is this so similar to a real person? Not just the appearance but also those reflexes and that presence. In the first place, it was formed from the spiritual mark that an elite left behind, the tool spirit said. Throughout history, out of all participants, only the person with the strongest battle prowess would be able to leave his spiritual mark behind, becoming an assessment for those who come afterward. Ling Han was even more curious now and asked, Then this is Su Ran of a certain clan, the starlit human figure said. Su Ran, he entered into the academy 300,000 years ago, and has been known as the greatest genius in history. He left 300 years later, charging out into the world alone, and no further news was heard of him, the tool spirit said. In this 1,000,000 years, no other person surpassed him? Ling Han was shocked. He was a monster. The tool spirit made its evaluation. In the same cultivation level, others could only approach his height, yet were unable to stand as his equal. What more surpass him? The test you are undergoing is only on the level of the Shattering Void tier, and he is also the keeper of the record on the Mountain River tier. This treasured spirit tool could actually start up another assessment on the level of the Mountain River tier. Ling Han's eyes could not help but blaze with fierce fighting spirit. Pointing at Su Ran's starlight body he asked, What if I can defeat him? Then you would have automatically passed the 3rd stage on the remaining 8 levels, the tool spirit replied. The test on every 3rd stage of each level is to withstand 10 moves from him, but the higher the level, the stronger he would be, and the finer his moves would be. Ling Han was filled with competitive spirit. He finally had a strong interest, and he said, Senior Su, please make your move. Take care. Su Ran hollered, and took the initiative to move, delivering a punch straight at Ling Han's chest. There was obviously no art to this move. It was simple and ordinary, but when the fist shot over, it felt as if the whole world was about to collapse, and Ling Han was at the center of the cave-in. Simplifying the complex, this was a mastery of fist heart. Ling Han nodded. The great Tao was most simple, and in fist arts, Su Ran's grasp of the skill had exceeded the move itself. A careless punch would be in accordance with the great Tao and truth, possessing ultimate might. However, cultivators were still strongest in their strength. Ling Han flipped over his palm and delivered a palm strike. As the earth overturning seal was used, a golden light flickered brilliantly. Pang! In the exchange of a single blow, Su Ran was forced back 30 steps, while Ling Han did not move at all. Ling Han could not help but frown and asked, "Your ability is obviously not limited, so why will you not exert your full effort?" "Because this is only the first level," the tool spirit answered. In the assessment of the 9-storied tower, one level was stronger than the previous. Ling Han broke out into laughter and said, "Unseal his power. I want to battle the strongest shattering void tier cultivator." The tool spirit considered it for a moment, then said, "As you wish." Hong, a frightening energy suddenly exploded from Su Ran's starlit body, becoming solid and transforming into waves that surged out. The waves washed over Ling Han's body, and he could not help but come out in goosebumps. This strength was too powerful. Yet Ling Han was fearless, and merely felt incredibly excited. He said, "This is the strength of 20 stars of shattering void tier. Ha ha ha, no wonder no one has been able to surpass you. You have really cultivated the strength of shattering void tier all the way to the maximum limit." In shattering void tier, the limit of 20 stars of shattering void tier was not for battle prowess, but rather strength. However, not many could reach battle prowess of 20 stars of shattering void tier. What more pure strength? "Come!" Ling Han laughed loudly, and approached fearlessly. Pang! With a single blow, Ling Han was sent flying. However, his physique was too monstrous. This punch did not even cause the slightest bit of injury to him. One could claim that if the test of the 3rd stage was to withstand 10 moves, then not just 10 moves, he would be fine even with 100,000 moves. Without reaching the strength of the immortal level, how could Su Ran possibly damage godly metal? With a loud shout, Ling Han came back around. He directly drew a bow and notched an arrow. The annihilating dragon star arrow was used, and one towards the other. Su Ran did not possess a physique as strong as his, and dared not to use his bare body to take this strike head-on. Immediately, he gripped his fist and delivered a blow at the arrow. Undoubtedly, the arrow was sent flying by his blow, but there was also a burst of starlight on Su Ran's hand. It seemed he had been injured. That was the annihilating dragon star arrow, after all, a powerful secret technique really inherited from an elite of the immortal realm. Added with the fact that Ling Han had conquered the whole lower realm, there was naturally no lack of resources in his possession. He reforged a level 10 treasured bow, and forged arrows from a certain amount of level 10 precious metal. What kind of strength did Ling Han presently possess? 16 stars of shattering void tier. If one took on this shot from him head-on, what shattering void tier cultivator would be unscathed? Unless his physique could also reach the level of Ling Han's physique. The tool spirit could not help but be stunned. Ling Han's physique and battle prowess both caused its eyes to light up. One had to know that this human had yet to reach the maximum strength of 20 stars of shattering void tier. Ling Han did not pull his punches at all. Xiao xiao xiao. Another 3 arrows consecutively shot out. Then wielding his sword he charged out. His right hand used the 10,000 techniques return to 1, whereas his left hand circulated the earth overturning seal, blasting out at Su Ran. Pang pang pang. The two were embroiled in a fierce battle. Endless waves of power spread out like waves in a sea. Ling Han used his battle prowess to the fullest. The other's strength was superior to his, so he was naturally not going to go head-to-head with him by force. Instead, he displayed his own battle prowess to its fullest, especially the annihilating dragon star arrow. He combined with it the 2 mystical powers of Thunderclap 9th Heaven and the Eye of Truth, and the battle prowess it could exhibit was the most terrifying. But, disappointingly, Su Ran did not have any weakness at all over his entire body. He was not a real living being, but rather branded by the tool spirit, making use of the essence Su Ran had left behind. So it naturally did not possess the weaknesses of an actual living being. However, while it did not have weaknesses, it could still be claimed that its whole body was covered with weaknesses. Ling Han shot out arrows madly, every shot frightening. Once he had closed the distance between himself and Su Ran, he abandoned the bow and used the sword. As the 10,000 techniques returned to one slashed out, exploding with an ultimate strike, it would be able to force even an elite the likes of Su Ran to retreat. The battle was at a stalemate. Chapter 896. 6th Level Genius. If it were any other person, even if their strength was 16 stars of Shattering Void tier, they also wouldn't be able to fight Su Ran head-on. However, Ling Han was different. His strongest edge wasn't battle prowess, but the ultimate defense brought about by the indestructible Heaven Scroll. This was the most terrifying part by nature. He was already invincible. 10 moves, 20 moves, 50 moves, 100 moves. They had long exceeded the upper limit of moves with the strongest battle prowess of the 9th level of White Star Tower, but the victor was still yet to be determined. Admittedly, Ling Han was being thoroughly thrashed by Su Ran, but under the effects of annihilating Dragon Star Arrow, Su Ran wasn't doing any better. His body continuously emitted flashes of starlight, seemingly about to collapse. If the battle could go on endlessly, then the losing party ought to be Su Ran. The reason was very simple. Ling Han's body was the level of godly metal. There was no solution to this. Stop! The tool spirit finally called a halt to the battle. The starlight of Su Ran's body immediately transformed into countless spots of light and dissipated. It paused and said, "This battle shall be considered a draw. You are indeed very strong. If your strength further increases by 1 star, then perhaps you can replace me and become the new guard here." Ling Han gave a faint smile. He was only interested in going all out to battle a strong opponent, wasn't inclined to care about being a replacement, especially when there wasn't anything good to be gained from it. He would hardly bother himself with such trouble. You may enter the 2nd level. A flight of stairs appeared in front of Ling Han. He strode forward and ascended the stairs to the 2nd level. The following tests would be the same as that on the 1st level. It would still be based on one's practice of martial arts techniques and using the strength of the spirit to strike the jade plaque, only that the difficulty of martial arts techniques would increase, and the jade plaque would also be strengthened, making it more and more challenging. At the 3rd stage, Ling Han didn't need to be tested and he automatically passed it. He had spent too much time on the 1st level. 3 speedy people had already rushed to the 3rd level. However, starting from the 2nd level, Ling Han's speed became faster as he made haste to catch up. Look! The 5th level of the tower has lit up. Who is it? So impressive. It must be Fairy Ji. She is someone who is on par with Luo Ba and Lin Yu. Since those two could pass through the 5th level, then Fairy Ji is certainly no exception. Could it be a dark horse like Ma Xing? Haha, you think too much. There can't be that many exceptions. Outside, everyone was in the midst of a heated discussion, while the higher-ups of the Northern Institution were also paying close attention to the assessment. After all, the competition amongst the 4 institutions was extremely fierce. Which one of them wouldn't want to emerge superior to the other 3 institutions? Hey, the 5th level of the tower has lit up again. Are you seeing things? Impossible. I am quite sure that the level has already gotten dark, and then lit up again. That's correct. By right, it shouldn't be lighting up for so long. There must be a second person who had passed the 5th level. Good gracious. There are so many geniuses in this round of the assessment. In the past, it would have been quite amazing to have 2 to 3 1-star geniuses. Now, there's actually 5 of them. Gosh, I might have been able to charge to the top 10 in the past, but now, I guess there's no hope for me. You really think too much. Even if in the past, there also wouldn't be the slightest possibility for you to achieve it. After a while, the 6th level of the tower was illuminated. What? Everyone was astounded this time. The 6th level of the tower had lit up again. This was the 2nd time previously. Only Ma Xing had passed through the 6th level. Could it be Fairy Ji? She is much more of a genius compared to Luo Ba and Lin Yu. Really unexpected. The higher the level, the longer the tower's level would be lit. For example, the first level and the second level had only lit up for about half of a heartbeat's time, but the illumination of the tower's sixth level was flashing for at least 10 heartbeats before it dimmed. The upper echelons of the northern institution were indescribably pleased. How many years would it take before they could meet any future two-star genius? It was at this moment that the tower's sixth level was illuminated again. Oh my goodness! The third two-star genius. Who could it be? One of them must be Fairy G, but what about the other one? Everyone was holding their heads in their hands. Being able to pass through to the fifth level was acceptable, but now it was really too exaggerated. One couldn't look at it as merely passing through one more level. Between a one-star genius and a two-star genius was a world of difference. Luo Ba clenched his teeth, had always set his sights on Ji Yuner. Moreover, the status of Ji clan was slightly inferior to that of the Luo clan. He had intended to ask his clan to propose marriage to the Ji clan after he had entered Scarlet Heaven Academy. But now, if Ji Yuner really became a two-star genius, then would the Ji clan still approve of this marriage proposal? Probably not, as they would definitely look for a more outstanding candidate to become the husband of Ji Yuner. One couldn't just look at him as currently being one of the three elites of the younger generation in the imperial capital. After 5 years, things would change. After the three of them entered the Scarlet Heaven Academy, naturally there would be new 3 great elites of the younger generation, or 4 great elites or 5 great elites and the like. No, he had to find a way. Since Ji Yuner was so outstanding, then all the more he couldn't give in to others. SHT. Heavens! The fifth level of the tower has lit up again. Everyone was shocked dumb. Sure enough, the fifth level of the White Star Tower had lit up again. The sixth one. But, the previous batch of people had passed through at about the same time. This person is only now passing through the fifth level. It should be that the person's potential has all but been exhausted, so it is impossible to go to the sixth level, some people speculated. This gained the agreement from the majority of the people who nodded their heads. A person who had the strength to pass through the sixth level would have been able to pass through the previous 5 levels easily. It wouldn't be like the case now, when others had passed through the sixth level while that person was only passing through the fifth level. Right. Obviously, that person's strength wasn't good enough. That person was Ling Han, of course. He was leisurely passing through the sixth level. No one was going to drive him out anyway, and it was not that he was in a hurry. However, as he didn't have to fight on the third level, his speed was actually getting a lot faster. At this time, most people had left the White Star Tower, while the strongest had already rushed to the sixth level. Those people at the lower levels wouldn't be able to drag their assessment out any longer. There are still 3 people in the tower. The higher-ups of the academy had confirmed with the Tool Spirit, and subsequently announced it. One of the 3 was definitely Ji Yuner. This was obvious as she had yet to come out after she had entered. Who wouldn't recognize this brilliant pearl whose name was famous throughout the imperial capital? However, no one else knew who the other 2 were. Could it be that the blockhead had passed through the 5th level, and even the 6th level? Li Weiwei's face was filled with astonishment. Then, she stomped her foot angrily. Doesn't that mean I have lost to him again? Ugh. Damn. This is horrible. Just then, the 6th level of the tower lit up again. Pooh! Those who had confidently said before that it was impossible for Ling Han to pass through the 6th level now coughed awkwardly, their faces filled with embarrassment. Fuck. This face-slapping was extremely painful indeed. Since you can pass through the 6th level, why don't you get a move on? How could there be someone like you who would torment other people? Someone has come out. A man was seen coming out of the entrance to the 9-storied tower. He was a young man clothed in embroidered robes, but almost no one could recognize him. However, everyone knew that anyone that came out would be a genius who had passed through 6 levels of the tower. I know him. His name is Cheng Haofei. He's a descendant of the Cheng clan. Cheng clan? The same Cheng clan as that of the Minister of War, Lord Cheng? Other than the Minister of War Lord Cheng, what other clan would dare to be addressed as the Cheng clan? That old man in the corner shook his head in disappointment. Although that junior of his was expected to become a 2-star genius, and indeed shocked the world with an amazing feat, he still fell short of his expectations. Damn, why would there be 3 6th-level geniuses? Chapter 897, 8 Levels. Although Cheng Haofei was somewhat disappointed, he still appeared to be full of confidence. He had passed through the first 2 stages of assessment on the 7th level, but did not manage to take on the 10 strikes from Su Ran. This meant that he still had plenty of room for improvement. After all, his talent had been clearly exhibited there. As long as he were to engage in more battles or cultivate some secret technique, then his battle prowess would improve by leaps and bounds. He remained completely unaware that there were 2 other people in the tower. Bearing an extremely confident smile, he faced everyone, intending to receive a tsunami of cheers, as well as the envious gazes of men and looks of adoration from women. But he was disappointed. Almost everyone was looking up at the White Star Tower, and apparently didn't realize his emergence as a super genius. Fuck, what was going on? What's this situation? Cheng Haofei couldn't stop a muscle in his cheek from twitching. This was a scenario that he had never expected. He nearly tripped over his own feet, and couldn't help stumbling a few steps. Calming himself down, he walked back, feigning disinterest. In actual fact though, he pricked up his ears to listen carefully. It turned out that there were 2 more people in the White Star Tower, and they had all passed through the previous 6 levels. What? The appearance of Ma Xing aside, there were actually 2 other people who could be on equal level with himself. As such, he probably could not even keep his 2nd place, and could even have slipped out of the top 3 and fallen onto the 4th position. Fuck. To hell with it. Had he known earlier, he would have waited another 5 years. He did not believe that so many geniuses would emerge in the next 5-year period. But now, he could only wait in the hopes that the other 2 in the tower were not that much of a genius compared to him. Even if he couldn't get 1st place, he could at least steadily remain in 2nd place. However, although everyone was concerned about the results of the remaining 2, the higher-ups of the Northern Institution had already summoned Cheng Haofei. Of course, they had to get acquainted with such a genius, and probably reap some benefits, lest he might choose to directly renounce his enrollment into the institution and enter the Eastern Institution 5 years later. They would then be chopped to pieces by the head of the Northern Institution. After a while, the 7th level of the tower glowed. This time, everyone had gone numb with shock. Passing through 7 levels. What kind of notion was this? 3-star genius. He wouldn't be weaker than Ma Xing, truly not weak at all. It was necessary to know that Ma Xing had the potential to become a 3-star genius by relying on King's Qi. But now, another's potential had jumped straight to 3-star level. Moreover, cultivators could later cultivate King's Kit wasn't an advantage that naturally belonged to some people. Who was it? Ultimately, who could it be? Not long later, a woman in a fluttering white dress, with flowing black hair like a waterfall and exquisite appearance of a fairy, was seen walking out. Big Sister Yun. Li Weiwei quickly ran over and exclaimed, "Congratulations to Big Sister Yun for passing the 7th level of the tower. In the future, you will be stepping into the immortal level as a 3-star genius." The rest of the people nodded their heads in agreement. It didn't take long for Ji Yuner to appear after the 7th level of the tower had lit up. Obviously, she had to have passed through the 7th level, but lost at the 8th level, and thus retreated. Oh, 7th level. Even for a magnificent and vast country like the chaotic star's majestic empire, only one could emerge after thousands of years. The pretty face of Ji Yuner changed color, and she said, "I did not pass the 7th level. I lost at the 3rd stage." What? Li Weiwei exclaimed. What? The others also exclaimed. It actually wasn't Ji Yuner. How could that be? Li Weiwei held her head in her hands in dismay, and kept stomping her foot, saying, "Unbelievable! No, I don't believe this. Really, it was that blockhead indeed. Arg, I want to trample him to death." It wasn't that it had never crossed her mind that the person who had passed through the 7th level of the tower could be Ling Han, but such a thought only appeared for a moment before it vanished. Who asked him be put together in comparison with Ji Yuner? But now, Ji Yuner had already admitted up front that she wasn't the person who had passed through the 7th level of the tower. So, there was only one person left. Ling Han. A cultivator who had come from the lower realm, an insignificant ant who would not be held in any regard by anyone of the immortal realm. Li Weiwei was finally convinced how could an emperor who had broken history by splitting open the sky to come into the immortal realm be simple. Weiwei, do you know this person? Ji Yuner could immediately guessed, having observed the change in color on Li Weiwei's face. Li Weiwei nodded and said, he is a cultivator from a small world who had arrived here at the immortal realm about 10 days ago. Ji Yuner. A cultivator from a small world. This was impossible. How could the cultivation environment of a small world compare with the immortal realm? Could the abundance of resources there be compared with that of the immortal realm? Could the elites there be compared with the immortal realm? Everything there was infinitely lagging behind, and it could be regarded as a barren land. But it was a person who came from such a barren land that had accomplished an amazing feat. The pass through the 7th level of the tower. This kind of aptitude could be ranked within the top 10 in the entire Scarlet Heaven Academy. The higher-ups of the Northern Institution were extremely excited. They gained much in this session of examination. Not only did 3 great geniuses came, but the performance of Ji Yuner showed that she had the potential of being a 2-star genius. In addition, 3 dark horses had appeared, and the one whose performance was the least of the lot also showed the potential of being a 2-star genius. As for the other 2, one possessed King's Chi, while the other had the potential to become a 3-star genius. Northern Institution would flourish. However, this was yet to be the climax. Mere moments later, the 8th level of the tower was illuminated. Goodness! I'm not mistaken, right? Had the moonlight suddenly become brighter, or is the 8th level really glowing? It's impossible that all of us also got it wrong. It is true that the 8th level of the tower has been lit. 4-star genius. At this time, the higher-ups of the Northern Institution were all unable to sit still, and came out together to wait beneath the White Star Tower, itching to meet with this super genius. 4-star genius, what kind of notion was this? This empire's left and right ministers, as well as the 7 generals, were 4-star geniuses. What kind of beings were these 9 people? They were the cornerstone of the chaotic star's majestic empire, practically standing at the summit of this planet. Aside from shock, everyone was also looking forward to know whether the person inside the tower could pass through the 9th level and become what was known only in legends a 5-star genius. This freak! Li Weiwei muttered to herself. Had she not seen it with her own eyes, she wouldn't have believed that arrogant prick could actually become a 4-star genius. When she thought of Ling Han, being arrogant and appearing full of confidence, she felt a kind of crazy urge to smash his face. Inside the tower, the gateway to the 9th level had been opened, but Ling Han stopped in his tracks, saying to himself, should I go up to the 9th level? Forget it, I should be able to take the 1st place now. There's no need to display my entire capacity for everyone's knowledge. Now I am a 4-star genius, so the Academy will definitely focus on nurturing me. While a 4-star genius is outstanding, the history of the Academy hasn't been without the appearance of such geniuses. However, as for 5-star, perhaps it might not be a good thing. A 5-star genius might even trigger the interference of the Empress, so much so that she might even have him investigated thoroughly to find out his secret for being so powerful. How could someone from a small world be so powerful? Honestly, if it wasn't for the sake of getting the 1st place, Ling Han would actually prefer to stop after passing through the 7th level. However, being a 3-star genius might not have been enough to suppress Ma Xing. Meanwhile, being a 4-star genius would definitely be more than enough to do so. As he thought about it this way, he turned around without hesitation. He didn't even go up to the 9th level. Chapter 898. Reward. When Ling Han came out of the White Star Tower, he saw that all eyes were focused on him. He couldn't help but think to himself, it seems that passing through the 8th level was a bit of an overkill. If I had known earlier, I would have stopped after passing through 7th level. Child, what is your name? An old man had rushed over and almost threw himself at Ling Han. He looked at Ling Han with a heated gaze as if the latter wasn't a full-grown man, but rather a beautiful fairy whose beauty was beyond compare. Ling Han suppressed the impulse to throw a punch. The old man's face was about to stick to him. Ling Han had no choice. In his excitement, the old man did not hide his own cultivation. There was a round of suns and moons behind him, meaning that he was an elite whose cultivation was of the minor levels of the sun-moon tier. If Ling Han were to throw this punch, he would definitely lose his life in the next second. Without losing his cool, he took a step back and said, "I am Ling Han." Although his combined age after having lived 2 lifetimes would be about 200 years old, his age wasn't even worth mentioning in the face of a Sun-Moon tier cultivator. Actually, even if his age was to be multiplied by 100, it wouldn't even be a fraction of the other party's age. Ling Han, kneel down quickly and perform the rites of a disciple. "I am accepting you as my disciple," the old man quickly said. "Get lost." An angry shout was heard as another old man rushed over and directly knocked against the previous old man, sending him flying. He bellowed, "This is my disciple." "Nonsense." The previous old man immediately leapt back and came to blows with the second old man. "Hee." The third old man came out, beaming at Ling Han as he said, "Kid, I am Elder Zhang Deman, Elder of Northern Institution by rotation. Come and pay respects to me as your master. With me as your backing, in the future, you can beat up whomever you want." Was this something a master should say? "Old man Zhang, you dare to fight with me over a disciple?" The fourth old man appeared, glaring at Zhang Deman. "That's right, old man Zhang. You are really too despicable. Taking advantage of us fighting to snatch away our disciple." The 2 old men from before had stopped fighting and walked back one after the other. "Kid, who are you taking as your master?" The 4 old men simultaneously turned to look at Ling Han. This made everyone witnessing the scene filled with envy. Being fought over by 4 elites of the Sun-Moon tier, all wanting to take him as their disciple. Wasn't this the highest honor? If this were to happen in one's lifetime, then what more could one ask for? Don't look at the fact that there were also elites of the Genesis tier in the Chaotic Star's majestic empire. In reality, how many of these elites were there? The Sun-Moon tier cultivators were actually the backbone of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire. Cultivators of the Genesis tier were more for the purpose of intimidation, and in general wouldn't make a move that easily. Of course, the Sun-Moon tier was also divided into 4 levels. These 4 old men were all at the minor levels, the lowest level within the Sun-Moon tier. "Stop wasting time. Go and sort out the admission procedure for everyone." Just then, a middle-aged man was seen flying over and stood at the peak of the 9-storied tower, giving instructions to those below. Although his voice wasn't very loud, it reverberated straight into the hearts of the people. "Yes, Lord Deputy Head." The 4 old men quickly bowed and paid their respects. Only then did everyone realize that this seemingly younger man was stronger than the 4 old men. This was slightly inconceivable, but the higher one's cultivation was, the longer one's life expectancy would be, while the rate of aging would on the contrary be slower. As such, in terms of real age, perhaps this middle-aged man was a lot older than Zhang Deman and the others. Given the instructions of the deputy head, Zhang Deman and the others naturally did not dare to continue fighting, and quickly made arrangements for those who had passed the assessment to be brought to the student dorms of the Northern Institution. Meanwhile, the group including Ling Han, Ma Xing, Cheng Haofei, and Ji Yuner was asked to stay back. The top 10 finalists were to be rewarded. The rewards for the top 7 were very simple. Each person would receive a true origin stone. As for the top 3, the rewards were much more substantial. Without a doubt, Ling Han was naturally the first, but the candidates for the second and third place, respectively, needed to be discussed. Ma Xing, Cheng Haofei, and Ji Yuner had all completed the challenges of the first 6 levels, and also passed the first 2 stages on the 7th level. Who ought to be in the second place, third, and fourth, respectively? After a round of discussion among the higher-ups of the institution, it was decided that Ma Xing would be in the second place, while Cheng Haofei and Ji Yuner were tied for third place. While this would require the Northern Institution to spend more resources on them, the Northern Institution was originally wealthy and imposing. Besides, they were cultivators of the Shattering Void tier, after all, so the amount of resources they would consume was limited. The top 3 students would get to enjoy great privileges. For example, they would be given a chance to bathe in the Black Jade Pool once a month. That wasn't to let you wash yourself clean. Black Jade Pool was a spiritual pool, something naturally formed of the heavens and the earth, that would provide the topmost nourishment for the body and spirit of cultivators. Moreover, after being taken over by the Scarlet Heaven Academy, a lot of precious treasures had been added into the pool to further enhance its effects. However, This pool would only be effective for those of the Shattering Void tier and Mountain River tier. It would have no effect for those of higher levels, or else it wouldn't have been placed in the Scarlet Heaven Academy. Even if it wasn't confiscated by the Imperial clan, wouldn't there still be the 9 kings, left and right ministers, as well as the 7 generals? Secondly, they would get 2 true origin stones every month as a reward. Those were an item unique to the immortal realm. Due to the presence of high density of spiritual chi of the heaven and earth here, it was turned into an essence with the appearance of a jade, whereby its energy could be extracted to be used by cultivators. Whether for purposes of cultivation or restoration, it would be an excellent supplementary artifact. Of course, using it to restore origin power would be too extravagant. As this item was extremely valuable, it was a treasure in itself. In addition, true origin stone could also be used as currency to buy precious items as well as in exchange for gold and silver, but it was believed that only fools would do this. Thirdly, there would be an extra replenishing spirit pill each month. Replenishing spirit pill could strengthen the spirit, and would be effective for the Shattering Void tier and Immortal level. However, the Immortals were just too powerful, and the effects of the replenishing spirit pill were just too pathetically little. Generally, the Immortals would consume the Star Young pill. Its effect was much more powerful by countless times, but the degree of its preciousness would also be more excessive by countless times. As long as one was a disciple of the Academy, one would get a replenishing spirit pill every month. The third place candidate would get an extra one, the second would receive 2, while the first be given 3. True Origin Stone and replenishing spirit pill were immediately handed out, but entering the Black Jade pool would have to wait until the following month. This was because the time allowed for the respective 4 institutions to enter the Black Jade pool had already been allocated earlier. The Northern institution had already used up its time for this month. After Ling Han and the others had gotten their rewards, they subsequently went to the place they would be living in for the next few years, or 10 years or even decades. Unless they were able to break through to the immortal level, they would always be staying here. Along the way, Zhang Deman was responsible for informing them of certain rules. For example, one shouldn't walk into the territory of the other 3 institutions for no reason, unless you were exceptionally strong. Else, you had to be prepared to be thoroughly thrashed. The Academy would encourage its students to learn from one another, but in principle, it was forbidden for high-level students to battle with low-level students unless the lower-level students had taken the initiative to provoke the former. Finally, Zhang Deman said something very strange. Also, there is a white cat here. You must not be tempted to provoke that cat by all means. You mustn't hurt even a single strand of its hair, otherwise no one can save you. Why? Everyone was absolutely baffled. Chapter 899. The Cat That Mustn't Be Trifled With. So powerful? What kind of cat is it? Li Weiwei asked. She was the daughter of the left minister, so she was naturally bold, without much reverence towards Zhang Deman. She was not afraid that he would rebuke her. Sure enough, Zhang Deman just smiled and said, "I'm not sure what is so special about the cat, but its owner. That person would be our Lord Head." Would that be Lord Yen Dongqi, head of Northern Institution? Li Weiwei asked again. Zhang Deman shook his head in reply, saying, "No, it is Lord Fufu Hui." At this moment, everyone's expression was filled with awe. Even Li Weiwei was gaping slightly, revealing an expression full of reverence. Fu Hui was the head of the Scarlet Heaven Academy, not the Northern Institution. He was an elite of the heavenly body tier, but no one knew the details about his cultivation level, as this elite tended to spend most of his time cultivating in seclusion. This was precisely the reason why the 4 major institutions of the Scarlet Heaven Academy tended to do things their own way, giving rise to fierce competition amongst the institutions. The 4 main institutions also had their respective heads, known as heads of the institution, but their cultivation level was at the perfection level of the Sun-Moon tier. Within the chaotic star's majestic empire, they could be considered the top elites. However, one shouldn't look at it as if it was only a difference of 1 level between the Sun-Moon tier and Heavenly Body tier. The gap of this 1 level was extremely large. Forget about the 1-star or 2-star geniuses. Even a 5-star genius wouldn't be able to cross over and break through the barrier of such a level. Even though Li Weiwei, Ma Xing, and others were super geniuses, None of them would dare to say that they could step into the heavenly body tier in the future. Even reaching the sun-moon tier would already be extremely difficult. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that among each batch of students recruited once every 5 years, about 90% of them could step into the mountain river tier. After all, those who were recruited were already geniuses themselves. However, only 1/10 of them could possibly reach the middle levels, while those who could attain major accomplishment would only be about 10%, and the rest that might be able to reach the level of perfection would be 1 in 1,000. At most, there would only be 1 in 10,000 who could step into the sun-moon tier. However, how many students were recruited each time? Therefore, it was considered quite normal not to have anyone reach the sun-moon tier in one or even in a few batches of students. With such a comparison, one should know just how formidable those of the heavenly body tier were. The white cat is the pet of head Fu, who likes it very much. So, even if the white cat loosens its bowels on your head, you must endure it. In the past, someone had slapped the white cat. That person was then crippled by Lord Fu and expelled. Zhang Deman said solemnly. Hey, could that be been the 7th young master of the AI clan? Someone queried. His surname was indeed AI. He was called AI Song. Zhang Deman nodded in response. The AI clan might not be a top-ranking clan, but it is also quite high-ranking among the second-class clans. Lord Fu actually didn't even give them any face. Hiss. Never provoke the cat. Everyone gave a cold shudder. There was none who didn't think that since that cat mustn't be provoked, and giving it a slap would face such miserable consequences, then if one was to grab a handful of its fur, what kind of miserable fate would await that person? Most of the people would stay in the dormitory arranged by the academy, but a small number of people merely strolled around the academy, and would return to stay in their own homes at night. Descendants of influential officials, such as Li Weiwei, would naturally choose whether to come to the academy or not depending on their mood. Ling Han finally had his own home. The Scarlet Heaven Academy was massive. Everyone was given their own courtyard. Even though it wasn't very big, there was a garden, a living room, and a bedroom. It could be said that even though it was small, it was completely furnished with all necessities. He was very satisfied. After sitting for a while, he began to consider his next move. Making money. He had first defined a goal. Of course, it wouldn't be gold and silver, but rather the true origin stones. It was the hard currency of the immortal realm, just like the gold and silver of the small world. With money, one could buy all kinds of resources. How to make money? Ling Han stroked his chin. Subconsciously, he took out the food in the Black Tower and started cooking. A few days ago when he was staying in the left minister's residence, he remained very low-key, cultivating in seclusion, but now this place was his territory, so his mind suddenly relaxed a lot. He had spent too much time with Hu Nyoha would also begin thinking about food when he had nothing else to do. Alas, I wonder how Hu Nyo, my parents, Helian Sun Shui, and my son are doing right now. Hey, can the food in the Black Tower be taken out for sale? This ought to be feasible. The food in the Black Tower was so delicious that even the immortals would drool over them. After all, the immortals were only more powerful in strength, and weren't pure-minded monks with scant desires. Otherwise, why would there be so many strong people remaining in the position of power? However, which restaurant would let the bills be settled with true origin stones? And if he wanted to deliver the food straight to the households of high-ranking officials or local tycoons, he would need to have the right connections. That's right. Ling Han clasped his hands together. Isn't Li Weiwei the right connection? If the daughter of the left minister wanted to do business, then who would not give her face? Anyway, the ingredients in the Black Tower didn't need any capital, so even if the profits of the sales were to be divided equally with Li Weiwei, it wouldn't matter much. After all, the one with a connection would be king. Ling Han nodded. In addition, he could also concoct alchemical pills such as this replenishing spirit pill, which would be extremely popular amongst those of the Shattering Void tier and Mountain River tier, and it would not be bought with gold or silver, but with true origin stones. Alchemy was his old business, and he was the best at it. In his past life, there was no knowing how much he had earned from this trade. Even the proud and arrogant Sword Emperor and the Setting Sun Saber Emperor at that time also had to bow their heads to him. This was also one way of doing it. Letting Li Weiwei help in liaising with the customers was putting his life in the hands of another, after all. That kind of young miss. There was no knowing when she might change her mind. Meanwhile, concocting alchemical pills would be different. Once the pills had been refined, how could he possibly be afraid of not being able to sell them? Where was that barbecued meat that he had put on the grill? Ling Han had just released the gold-seeking rat from the Black Tower. Now that he had brought this little guy, his talent was indeed very helpful. But when he turned around, the 2 pieces of meat on the grill that were nearly roasted had gone missing. He couldn't help but be surprised. That meat was practically stolen from right under his nose without him realizing it. The other party's movement was extremely fast, and the actions were also very nimble. It was quite astonishing. However, when his eyes swept across the vicinity, he almost choked. On the wall of the courtyard, a fat white cat was seen having a hearty meal, and what its mouth was nibbling was naturally the roasted meat that Ling Han was missing. Zhang Deman's words immediately flashed through Ling Han's mind. The big white cat. Fuck, it wouldn't be such a coincidence, right? Ling Han's mouth slightly twitched. Ling Han felt a sudden urge to strike it, only to remember that it wasn't without reason that the former senior brother disciple couldn't help but hit this big white cat. He snorted and said, "Little thief, I will forego this one meal. I'll consider it as my treat to you. However, don't think you can steal again." This big white cat was merely in the shattering void tier. Even if its body was agile and its speed was amazing, as long as Ling Han remained vigilant, he would definitely not let the other party succeed again. Meow! The white cat cried out arrogantly, which meant, if I want to eat, then could you stop me? It picked up the rest of the meat and left abruptly with a leap. Chapter 900. Fine, as long as you pay. On his first day of entering the Scarlet Heaven Academy, a fat white cat came and put on airs to establish its authority. Ling Han gave a sigh. This isn't a good start. After a good night's rest, he went to attend class the next day. On this day, a teacher would come to explain to them some secrets regarding the cultivation of the shattering void tier. On one hand, he had some interest in the subject, and on the other, he wanted to meet with Li Wei in order to discuss with her about doing business. Naturally, he wouldn't be cutting classes. He arrived neither too early nor too late. By the time that he had arrived, he saw that about 1/3 of the seats in the classroom had already been occupied. The classroom was large enough to accommodate about 500 people. This batch of newly recruited students was less than 500, so the place was sufficient to accommodate all the new students. Senior Brother Ling. Brother Ling. Ling Han. Upon seeing Ling Han, quite a lot of people came up to greet him and appeared to be exceptionally warm. Only a minority of talented individuals showed indifferent expressions, apparently not willing to fawn over Ling Han. This was something quite normal for everyone. A 4-star genius. How many were there in the entire chaotic star's majestic empire? More importantly, the assessment of the White Star Tower included up to 5-star genius, which meant that Ling Han was qualified to climb to the highest level of martial arts. Perhaps, he would be an elite of the heavenly body tier a million years later. Of course, given that a period of a million years was really long, innumerable changes could happen in between. Perhaps Ling Han would have already died by then. This was also the reason why some people held themselves to be above politics and worldly considerations. After all, at present, only Ling Han's talent had been exhibited. There was no knowing how strong he would be in actual combat. If they had known that Ling Han had been equally matched against Su Ran's spirit, then a lot of people would likely change their minds immediately. Ling Han just smiled and nodded his head in greeting towards everyone. He had always been a person who would return the kindness of others tenfold, but if the other person were to walk all over or provoke him, he would absolutely show no mercy. Humph! Shameless! The Luo brothers came as well. Naturally, they wouldn't be bothered to suck up to Ling Han. Both brothers bore fiery gazes. Who would have thought that an insignificant ant of a small world would actually seize first place in the assessment this time? Ha ha ha! Luo Ba suddenly faced upwards and let out a few howls. Whom this was directed at was obvious. Senior Brother Luo, what do you mean by this? Someone asked. Although Luo Ba was very strong, the strength of the Luo clan wasn't considered top tier within the imperial capital, so someone was naturally bold enough to argue with him. I guess all of you still have no idea this Ling Han, senior brother Ling, hee. It was only but a few days ago that he flew up here from a small world. Luo Ba unveiled a big secret. What? Everyone cried out in surprise. He was an insignificant ant from a small world. Suddenly, many people revealed expressions of disgust. How could they humble themselves to make the acquaintance of such a lowlife? Yet, there were also some people who expressed even more admiration. A person from a small world could actually be so amazing. It really wasn't easy. The attitudes of the students had undergone extreme polarization. This was a deeply rooted notion. Some people were of the view that a small world was too primitive and too backward, and showed extreme disdain. Ling Han. Luo Ba couldn't help but smile. He reached out and said, "Did you forget what I said yesterday? Do you dare to spar with me?" Spar? What right do you have to spar with me? Are you even qualified to spar with me? Although Ling Han wasn't a vain person, he absolutely didn't have a good impression of Luo Ba, and so wouldn't give any face to the other party. Luo Ba was so angry that he stomped his foot. He was one of the 3 great elites of the younger generation in the imperial capital. It couldn't be that he wasn't even qualified to spar with Ling Han, right? He forced down his boiling anger and said, "I want to duel with you." "Fine, pay me an appearance fee. Otherwise, there's nothing to discuss." Ling Han said, "It's not much, just give 10 true origin stones, but if I win, then you would have to compensate me another 100. Many people laughed out loud. This senior brother Ling was a really shrewd person, even trying to make money out of a duel. Luo Ba had wanted to agree at once, but quickly restrained himself. Although he was the leader of the younger generation of Luo clan, it was slightly difficult for him to take out 10 true origin stones in one go. The crucial point was, he might be able to take out 10 true origin stones, but what if he lost? 100 true origin stones was a very huge amount indeed, at least it was beyond his control. Ling Han's performance was quite amazing, so he had to consider the possibility of losing. At first, it wasn't a big deal. His ranking was below that of Ling Han, so no one would laugh at him even if he lost. But if he won, then he would be able to trample all over the glory surrounding Ling Han for getting first place. Yet now, with such a high stake, he dared not agree so easily. Unless he could be certain of defeating Ling Han. "Coward, do you intend to use this method to avoid a duel?" Luo Ba certainly wouldn't lose on his stand. Ling Han waved his hand dismissively, saying, "Stop talking about such trivial matters. If you want to fight, I can accept your challenge, but there's nothing to discuss if you don't have true origin stones. Do you think that my time isn't valuable like yours? Poor people without true origin stones should refrain from whining." Luo Ba was seething with so much anger that he almost agreed, but he still managed to forcibly restrain himself. He had to be 100% sure of gaining victory. Ha 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 ha! Amidst the jingle-like laughter, 2 beautiful women were seen coming in from the door, one clothed in green robes, tender and charming, while the other appeared elegant like a fairy in flowing white robes. Both women had their respective strengths. While their temperaments were completely different, both were charming all the same, causing others to be intoxicated with their beauty. They were Li Weiwei and Ji Yuner, 2 of the 3 great beauties of the imperial capital. "Well said, Ling Han." Li Weiwei came over and showed her support for Ling Han. "He is my man." She immediately realized her own mistake, and quickly corrected herself, adding, No. He is a man of the left minister's residence, and my follower. If any of you dare to bully him, then you will stand as my enemy. You had better consider the consequences." Although there was no shortage of descendants of influential officials in the Scarlet Heaven Academy, was there anyone whose status was higher than that of the daughter of the left minister, at least in this batch? Those who had felt disdain for Ling Han earlier humphed. Although they didn't dare to confront Li Weiwei, they also certainly wouldn't take to heart Li Weiwei's words. After all, Ling Han only flew up here from a small world about 10 days ago. He would be categorized as one with neither foundation nor backing, so what if they were to trample on him? Ling Han looked at Li Weiwei and smiled. "How come you are suddenly so nice to me? I'm somewhat not used to it." "TSK. Of course, I still detest you very much, blockhead. But you are my follower, and only I can bully you. If other people can also do that, Then wouldn't they be on the same level as me? Of course that cannot be allowed. Li Weiwei raised her chin proudly, revealing her porcelain neck, beautifully white and tender as a swan's. Its beauty was beyond one's imagination. Ling Han burst out laughing, not taking her words to heart, and said, "Drop by my place later, I have something to discuss with you." "Damn blockhead, don't tell me that you have designs on me?" Li Weiwei suddenly looked alarmed. "Don't think that you can make me sleep with you. In your dreams." Ling Han was dumbstruck. This little girl is too open-minded. Also, what could she be thinking about all day? Chapter 901. Class starts. What Li Weiwei was thinking about all day was naturally what every young woman would be thinking about. When they met a Prince Charming who was handsome, dashing, and with abilities so strong no precedent or antecedent existed, they thought about him having a wonderful romance with themselves. Since her losing to Ling Han, this blockhead would occasionally appear in her dreams. He actually interfered in the love between herself and her Prince Charming, and actually wanted to snatch her away. Unfortunately, it was all in her dreamscape, and she had no ability to resist. Thus, she was always bullied by Ling Han. This made the fourth young miss of the Li clan very upset. Every time she woke up, she would be gritting her teeth in resentment. She had not yet given Ling Han a good thrashing, and this guy had already bullied her quite a few times in her dreams. There was nothing that could be done. Who asked the fourth young Mrs. Status to be too noble? If she sparred with someone, the other would usually go easy on her, yet she was horribly defeated by Ling Han, and that was indeed an unforgettable experience. Hence, when she heard Ling Han invite her to his residence, Li Weiwei immediately exercised her abundant imagination, and thought that this blockhead had some evil designs on her, so she naturally blurted out her thoughts. "You aren't satisfied with just bullying me in my dreams, and still want to force yourself on me?" "Weiwei." Ji Yuner hurriedly pulled Li Weiwei back, afraid that she would say something else that was incredibly shocking. Li Weiwei covered her mouth, realizing that she had blurted something unbelievable out. Then, she immediately glared at Ling Han. This was naturally Ling Han's fault. Who asked him to always embarrass me in my dreams? The two girls found a spot to sit down. This immediately attracted a great many to approach them and attempt to strike up a conversation. They had their eyes either on the beauty of these two women, or Li Weiwei's noble status was the daughter of the left minister not awesome enough. "Ma Xing is here," someone announced, and everyone turned to look at the door. They saw a sturdy young man walk in. Both his arms were bare, and he exuded a wild air, practically strong enough to cause suffocation. Perhaps his king's qi had developed precisely from his long-term contact with wild beasts. Ma Xing looked as if he had not fully woken yet. He looked like he could barely keep his eyes open. However, when he entered the classroom and saw Ling Han, that hazy gaze immediately became bright and alert. He stared at Ling Han and said, "Ling Han, I want a spa with you." "All right." Ling Han nodded. "If you want me to move, please pay 10 true origin stones first. If you lose, you have to pay another 100. I have to check the payment first as I cannot possibly fight for nothing." Many laughed loudly. Ling Han's money-grubbing tendencies were really too overwhelming. Li Weiwei grabbed her head and murmured, "This shameful guy, fancy that I stood up for him just now. Now, he has caused even me to be embarrassed." Yet Ji Yuner smiled, and as her beautiful eyes swept over Ling Han, a hint of curiosity filled her gaze. What kind of man was this person? Abruptly, Ma Xing's aura was stifled. He had come from the wilderness, so how could he possibly possess any true origin stones? After being dazed for a moment he finally replied, "All right, when I have so many true origin stones, we shall fight." He was much more decisive than Luo Ba, and many who saw this nodded in approval. He was really proving himself as one who had come from the wilderness. He had a very straightforward, decisive character. Ma Xing no longer stared at Ling Han. As his eyes swept over and he spotted Ji Yuner, he immediately walked over and said, "Beauty, I like you. Why don't we eat some meat together later on?" Damn! A considerable number of people choked directly. They had seen people who were straightforward in their speech, but to be straightforward to this degree. This was really the first time they had seen such a person. It was nothing strange to like Ji Yuner. She had enough admirers to line up in a queue that could encircle the whole capital city 3 times. Still, Ma Xing was definitely the first to be so straightforward about it. Additionally, how could you woo a girl like that? You actually bluntly expressed the desire to treat her to meet. Were you planning to use this to bribe Fairy Ji? It was really silly to an adorable degree. Ji Yuner smiled reservedly and replied, I have something else on after class. If there is a chance in future, I will share a meal with senior brother Ma. Big sister Yun, what do you have on? Li Weiwei deliberately asked, her head tilted to one side as if in doubt. She was someone who wanted the whole world in chaos. Ji Yuner directly used a finger to tap her small head, and after rolling her eyes, said, Have you forgotten? I will be accompanying you later so that you won't have to worry you will be falling into someone's trap. Oh! Li Weiwei nodded and tugging on Ji Yuner's arm said, Right. You have to protect me. If there are 2 of us, that blockhead would definitely not dare to act rashly. After being gently refused, Ma Xing could not help but scratch his head. Then he sat down at one side. Soon, he sprawled out on his table and began sleeping. His snoring was as loud as thunder. Indeed, he had not woken up fully. Li Weiwei immediately leaned towards Ji Yuner's ear and said, Big sister Yun, you definitely can't like this guy. He snores like a pig, and if you marry him, you would have to suffer every single day. Ji Yuner rolled her eyes again. Everything about this best friend of hers was great, except for the fact that she had an overactive imagination, which could make one not know whether to laugh or cry. As the time for class to begin arrived, more and more people came. When Lin Yu appeared, many immediately revolved around him. His popularity was definitely excellent, and even Li Weiwei, as the daughter of the left minister, could not compare to him. Da da da. Crisp sound of footsteps rang out. It had an indescribable rhythm to it. It was obvious no one had seen the person yet, but just the footsteps caused one to uncontrollably think that an extremely beautiful woman was coming, for it could be the only explanation why those footsteps had such an amazing rhythm to them. All at once, the noise in the classroom immediately quieted. At the instant these footsteps appeared at the entrance, the whole classroom was already dead silent. They saw an incredibly alluring figure appear at the entrance. Her figure was tall and slender, fine and delicate, and every inch of it was perfect. And it was a bit too perfect. For example, her breasts were too big, her waist was too slim, and her hips were too rounded and erect, causing those who saw her feel like they were about to lose control of themselves. Her long hair cascaded over her shoulders, and the sunlight spread out through her raven-black hair, exuding a hazy kind of beauty. When everyone's eyes turned to her face, they experienced an instant of suffocation. How could there possibly be such an exquisitely beautiful person in this world? Li Weiwei and Ji Yuner were both unprecedented beauties, but they obviously paled in comparison. It was not that they were not as beautiful as her, but rather her bearing and presence would intoxicate one with just a single look. There was a great many people in the immortal realm, and added with a generally long lifespan, there was naturally a shockingly great number of beautiful women. In a small world, a beauty would only appear once every 1,000,000 years, but here, it was possible that you could find a good few in a single city. When the quality of appearance had reached the extreme limit, then who the victor was would be judged by their bearing and status. For example, why was the Empress of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire named the greatest beauty in the world, and could cause the emperors of 2 majestic empires to be willing to deliver their whole empire into her hands? Admittedly, it was definitely because she was unbelievably beautiful, but there was also another important reason, and that was her ability. She was an elite that had perfected the heavenly body tier 1. Such ability and status would fill a man with endless desire to conquer her, and naturally added more credit to her beauty. Of course, rumors were that the Empress was indeed graceful and elegant. Even when the left minister and the others went to inform her of major business matters, they did not dare to look directly at this Empress at all, as they were afraid that they would do something offensive. That would really be seeking their own demise. Ling Han had never seen the Empress of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire before, but he had to admit that this beauty at the entrance was indeed extremely captivating, and had even surpassed Zhu Xian Heir as well as the heavenly phoenix divine maiden. Chapter 902. a beauty that is already taken. In the classroom, a series of thumping heartbeats was heard, fast like the beats of a drum. Even Ling Han felt slightly dazed and a little out of control. What more the others? This woman walked into the classroom, yet did not find a place to sit down. Instead, she stood on the platform and opened her mouth to say, "I am Shui Yanyu, and from today on, I am your lecturer." Wah! A round of cheers rose up in the classroom, and everyone was excited. This extremely beautiful woman was actually their teacher. She was already extremely attractive in the first place, but the forbidden identity of her as their teacher would make their hearts flutter even further. It's actually Shui Yanyu. She entered into the Northern Institution about 20 years ago, right? At the time, she and Zhou Menghuai were collectively called the twin pearls of the empire, and their fame was even greater than that of the present three beauties of the imperial capital. I really can't imagine. Only 20 years passed, and she already advanced into the mountain river tier. The level of the shattering void tier was too low, and no elite would deliberately focus on studying it. Thus, the class commonly would be taken over by a student that had just advanced into the mountain river tier as they had experience they could share with their juniors. Of course, the person that could hold the position of a lecturer had to have obtained an extraordinary result in the shattering void tier, and would at least have battle prowess worth 19 stars of shattering void tier. I heard that senior brother Zhao is currently pursuing senior sister Shui. Which senior brother Zhao? Zhao Luan, senior brother Zhao, of course. Hiss, a top genius from 500 years ago who reached battle prowess of 20 stars of shattering void tier at the age of 26, broke through to the mountain river tier at 30, advanced into the middle levels at 90, and into the higher levels at 380 years old. Zhao Luan, that senior brother Zhao. Aside from him, who else would qualify to be addressed as senior brother Zhao in the whole Northern Institution? AI. Then we can only admire senior sister Shui from afar, as she will be none of our business. Don't admire her too much either. I heard that senior brother Zhao is incredibly intimate with senior sister Shui, and would be displeased even if someone just looked too long at her. I advise everyone not to talk to senior sister Shui as much as possible, or else. Hee hee. Everyone sighed in despair. They had so fortunately been assigned a teacher beautiful enough to ensnare and enrapture the senses, yet were unable to court her at all. They had to be careful even when talking to her so as to avoid attracting Zhao Luan's attention, or they would definitely be done for. Zhao Luan had another identity, and that was the only son of the great General Zhao. One of the 7 generals, General Zhao was an elite of the heavenly body tier. He himself was extremely powerful, and his background was also extremely strong as well, so who would dare try to compete with him over a woman? Big sister Shui is so beautiful. Li Weiwei's hands were clasped tightly, and her eyes had practically become stars. Yet Ji Yuner sighed lightly in her heart. She was a bit like Shui Yanyu, as she, too, had no power over her own marriage. Hence, it was nothing good to be beautiful and possess high talent, unless she was monstrous enough to reach the level of the Empress of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire. Only then would she be able to take control of her own destiny. I have cultivated to the battle prowess of 20 stars of shattering void tier, so I can still give you some guidance, Shui Yanyu said. Her voice was sweet, and hearing her speak would make one feel great enjoyment. First, let's talk about why we should aim for 20 stars of shattering void tier. A student raised his head and said, I know. Though he knew that the beauty was already taken, he still wanted to make a good impression on this exquisite beauty. The higher the battle prowess in the shattering void tier, then the stronger your battle prowess would be in the immortal level. Shui Yanyu nodded and said, That's right. The living beings in the immortal level really have too long of a lifespan. For example, once you step into the mountain river tier, you would have a lifespan of 100,000 years. Advancing every minor level would add on another 100,000 years. However, precisely because of that, advancement through the cultivation levels would be increasingly slower and slower, so it would be considered not too bad even if you could only break through once every few millennia. As a result, we would spend 100 years at most in the shattering void tier to aim for the highest battle prowess, yet could benefit in the next 100,000 years or even next 10 million years. Hence, I advise everyone to definitely be patient. Even if you do not rush up to battle prowess of 20 stars, you should at least reach 18 stars. Ling Han nodded internally. However, He was slightly confused as well. Even Wu Gaoyuan, Xiao Miaoyan, and the others had reached battle prowess of 18 stars. So how could Yi Shuang only have battle prowess of 15 stars? In her strongest condition, she was an elite of the Sun-Moon tier. Then, it was obvious that the force behind her had to surpass the 5 sects in power. But, even the 5 sects could nurture an heir with 18 stars of Shattering Void tier, so why was she so inferior? In a small world, battle prowess reaching 15 stars was indeed extremely amazing, but in the immortal realm, most likely everyone in this classroom had that kind of battle prowess, so it was not uncommon at all. He would ask her when he saw her again. Shui Yanyu paused for a moment, then said, "Now, I will share some insight with you about aiming for the extreme limit of battle prowess." Indeed, she hid nothing, and explained clearly about her experiences on how she had rushed up to 20 stars of Shattering Void tier, but as everyone listened, they gaped in amazement. They really could not tell just from looking that this extremely alluring beauty would actually work so hard. According to how she had done things, it was very possible that she could have died. Ling Han suddenly opened his mouth and asked, "Excuse me, Teacher Shui. How can we develop our pure strength to 20 stars of Shattering Void tier?" The classroom was completely silent before tumultuous laughter broke out. "I'm about to laugh myself to death. What kind of foolish nonsense is that? How could it be possible that strength could reach 20 stars? Haha, if one's strength could reach 20 stars of Shattering Void tier, then how many stars could his battle prowess reach? 25 stars? 30 stars? Don't think nonsense. That is not possible. He's really proving himself to have come from a small world, actually asking such a boorish question." Yet Shui Yanyu waved her hand, and answered solemnly, "According to the research of former sages, after we have cultivated our origin power to the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier, we would only have 4 stars worth of space for improvement at most. The physical body is the same. There is similarly only 4 stars left to improve." It was different when a beautiful woman was talking, and everyone immediately silenced. But going by that calculation, the extreme limit of strength would be 17 stars, and there is still a slight gap from 20 stars. Shui Yenyu's eyes swept over the class and she said, "Let me tell all of you, strength of 20 stars of Shattering Void tier does indeed exist." "What?" they all exclaimed in shock. This was too inconceivable, and had completely shattered their perceptions. Years ago Su Ran, Senior Su, reached strength of 20 stars of Shattering Void tier when none before had done so, and none afterward did, either. Shui Yenyu's beautiful eyes were bright, and her gaze revealed powerful admiration. If Su Ran suddenly appeared, it might be that he would not need more than a few words to win the heart of this beautiful woman. "Then how would we make up for these 3 stars of strength?" someone questioned. Shui Yanyu shook her head, then answered, "This is humanly impossible as one would need the aid of the heavens. For example, you could accomplish some amazing feat and obtain the approval of the heavens and earth." A thought flashed in Li Weiwei's mind, and she asked, "Big Sister Shui, if one has come by splitting open the sky of a small world, would they get the aid of the heavens?" Shui Yanyu thought for a moment, then replied, "There has never been a small world that has appeared in the joint peace planet by splitting open the sky, so I am unsure. However, if one can split open the sky, this is indeed an amazing great feat, so it would not be impossible for him to be rewarded richly by the heavens and earth." Li Weiwei nodded. The Great Ling Empire had come by opening their sky, and this was no secret among the higher-ups of the nation. However, the Great Ling Empire was really too weak, so which great figure would take it to heart? Thus, among the younger generation, she was the only one aware that Ling Han was an emperor that had come by opening the sky. This guy had been capable of opening the sky, so his battle prowess was bound to have reached 20 stars, and with the additional reward from the heavens and earth, how powerful could his present battle prowess be? Li Weiwei's eyes instantly widened. Chapter 903. Discuss a business deal. Yet Ling Han thought of something else. In theory, it would be the inhabitants of the immortal realm that could not cultivate to 20 stars of Shattering Void tier, because the final 3 stars of strength was an unbreachable gap. Only people of a small world, through the bountiful rewards obtained from opening the sky, would be able to gain those additional 3 stars of strength. From a certain aspect it was fair. You, as an inhabitant of the immortal realm, enjoyed an endless supply of resources from birth, so you would have to make some kind of sacrifice in exchange. Of course, this kind of sacrifice was practically negligible. Just look at how many years the joint peace planet had existed, yet how many small worlds arrived by opening their sky in these many years. However, what qualified Su Ran to reach strength of 20 stars of shattering void tier, then? He had to have come by splitting open the sky. Why weren't there any legends about him? Even Xiang Chengyun thought that Ling Han was the first person in history to come by splitting open the sky, but there obviously had appeared another one 300,000 years ago. Perhaps some kind of secret was hidden behind this. Su Ran appeared 300,000 years ago. He stayed in the Scarlet Heaven Academy for only 300 years, and when he reached the peak of perfection of the Mountain River tier, he left the chaotic star's majestic empire, and perhaps even joint peace planet. From then, all information about him was lost. Shui Yenyu said, if you want to attain strength of 20 stars of shattering void tier, you have to do 3 things simultaneously. First, you have to increase your origin power. Second, increase the strength of your physical body. Third, increase the might of your secret techniques. Today, we shall begin from increasing the strength of the physical body, and this is also the easiest place to start. She guided the students in their cultivation. This was really very simple. Just shatter all the bones in the body, then use a secret technique to temper them before restructuring your skeletal structure again. Once could only increase a little bit of the toughness of your physical body, but tempering for 100 times, your body could become as tough as steel. Hearing her say such an understatement, they all felt a muscle in their faces twitch. This was too frightening, right? How many could bear such agony? If they could knock themselves unconscious, and could complete the tempering under a completely ignorant, unaware state, that'd be fine. However, this required you to maintain awareness, and take the initiative to make the sacrifices to activate the process to be able to obtain the desired effects. Everyone understood the logic, but to accomplish it? It was really too difficult. Thankfully, they did not need to aim for strength of 20 stars. It was enough for them to push their battle prowess up to 20 stars. This, in comparison, was much easier, and there was no need to torture themselves so horribly. The day ended, and they all felt a ripple in their hearts due to Shui Yenyu's outstanding beauty and grace, but also felt slight respectful fear towards her, worrying that she would force them to break all the bones in their bodies. This was definitely no joking matter. Thankfully, Shui Yenyu also had to work on her own cultivation. Hence, they only had to go to class once every 5 days. At other times, they would be cultivating on their own. If they had any question, they had to keep it for next class. The teachers in the academy naturally could not compare to masters that were taken through the proper rites. This was not a real master-disciple relationship, but merely passing on of their skill. Ling Han called Li Weiwei out and headed to his place of residence. Ji Yuner followed suit. Hey, you're acting so mysterious. What actually did you want to say? Li Weiwei was an impatient person, and could no longer refrain from asking the moment they entered the courtyard. Ling Han chuckled and said, I want to treat the both of you to a meal. Tisk. Li Weiwei immediately scoffed. Do you think I haven't eaten exotic delicacies? To actually use this kind of method to bribe me? Hold on. She stared at Ling Han and said, Hey. It can't be that you've put some drug in the food, and plan to conspire against us, right? You animal, you actually want to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. How dirty. Wei. Ji Yuner called out, her pretty face flushed bright red. Even she was astonished by the rich imagination this girl had. Ling Han drew out food ingredients from the Black Tower, and began cooking. He said, take it or leave it, do you think I'm begging you to stay here? I will not fall for your reverse psychology trick. That kind of ploy is something I've already done before I was 3. Li Weiwei suddenly took a sniff, and her eyes trained on the 3 pieces of meat on the grill, and then turned to glance at the soup on the side as well. Smells nice, she said, moved. None of your business. Ling Han said, smiling, there's poison inside this meat, so just stay and watch from the sidelines. Humph, if you dare to put poison in it, I'll kill you. Li Weiwei could not help but lick her lips and said, Blockhead, where did this meat come from? It smells great. Ling Han tossed her a look, then asked, what is it? Do you want to eat? Damn blockhead. Li Weiwei humphed. You really are petty. I just teased you a bit. Fine, I want to eat. So what about it? If you don't like it, come and bite me. Ling Han was struck speechless. No wonder the left minister had such a headache about this beloved daughter of his. Indeed, she did not have the slightest bit of reserved nature a well-bred young lady should have. He smiled and said, I still have much of this type of food. So, I want to make a business deal with you. You want to sell them to me? All right, however much you have, I'll take them all, Li Weiwei said with a casual wave of her hand, appearing to be very rich and overbearing. Yet Ling Han looked at her doubtfully and retorted, How many true origin stones would you have? If you have less than 1,000, then don't tell me you're rich. Li Weiwei opened her mouth to retort, but ultimately sighed in defeat. She really could not produce 1,000 true origin stones. The nobler the clan, the stricter the restrictions would be on the expenditure of their juniors. That was because if you had a lot of wealth in your hands, you could possibly spend your time drinking and making merry. However, the young age was the golden period of cultivation, so how could you waste it foolishly like that? Meanwhile, Ji Yunar's beautiful eyes lit up, and she asked, So what senior brother Ling means is to sell these food ingredients to the various noble and prestigious clans. Ling Han clasped his hands, smiling and said, Junior sister Ji is truly intelligent. He was ranked first in this batch of freshmen, and thus whether they were older or younger than him, all would have to address him as senior brother. Li Weiwei was displeased, and mumbled, What part of me is stupid? However, this is not spiritual meat. No matter how delicious it is, I do not think anyone would be willing to pay true origin stones for it. Ji Yunar could tell that Ling Han obviously wanted true origin stones. Furthermore, he wanted a large amount. Spiritual meat? What is spiritual meat? Ling Han questioned. Li Weiwei immediately scoffed and answered, You really are a country bumpkin, you don't even know what spiritual meat is. Let me tell you, only immortal-level demonic beasts could nurture spiritual meat. That is the most essential part of them, and one could devour it directly. It would greatly replenish your energy, and could also improve your cultivation. The effects are even better than the true origin stones. Unfortunately, no matter how big the demonic beast is, the nurturing of spiritual meat is influenced by cultivation level. If the demonic beast is in the minor levels of the mountain river tier, there is only as small a piece as this. She demonstrated the size to be about the size of a thumb. It was really pitifully small. Blockhead, you really didn't put any drugs in it? Li Weiwei's face was filled with suspicion. If you're not going to eat it, give it back to me. Ling Han pretended he was about to take back the plate. Go away. Now that you've handed it into my hands, it belongs to me now. There's no way you're taking it back. Li Weiwei hurriedly defended her food. Using chopsticks, she picked up the barbecued meat and bit down. Abruptly, she had swift change of expression. Chapter 904. Descendant of the White Tiger. Weiwei, what is it? Ji Yunar asked hurriedly. She would naturally not take Li Weiwei's theory of the food being drugged seriously, but she was still worried when she saw Li Weiwei's current expression. This man from a small world might really not know respect and fear and do something shocking. It's too delicious, Li Weiwei suddenly exclaimed. Then she began wolfing down the food, and ate all the remaining barbecued meat. Then she turned to look fixedly at the plate in front of Ji Yunar, her eyes bright as if she was about to pounce over any moment. Ji Yunar could not help but stretch out her arm to guard her food, and asked, Is it really so delicious? Li Weiwei turned her face around and demanded, Blockhead, quickly serve the remaining barbecued meat. Yet Ling Han smiled and said, Will you pay true origin stones for it? Yes. Li Weiwei said impatiently, Quick, hand it over, I want to eat to my heart's content today. Take care you don't become fat, Ling Han said with a grin. Ha 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 ha, no matter how much I eat, I won't become fat. I have a natural perfect figure, Li Weiwei declared proudly. Ling Han picked up that completely cooked piece of meat and placed it onto Li Weiwei's plate. The girl was instantly ecstatic, and hurriedly used her chopsticks to pick up her meat, beginning to eat delightfully again. Ji Yuner could not help but feel curious. Was it really that delicious? Li Weiwei was the fourth young miss of the left minister. What exotic delicacies had she not eaten before? Yet now, she was actually so filled with unbearable anticipation. She elegantly picked up her chopsticks, plucked the barbecued meat, and took a light bite with her snow-white teeth. To be honest, the way this meat was barbecued was really not all that impressive, but in a single bite, the strong aromatic taste of meat diffused out instantly in the mouth. That kind of delicious taste would really make even one's spirit quiver. How could it be so delicious? She was more reserved, and also more restrained, but she still felt an urge to open her mouth wide and begin wolfing down the meat. Meow! Right at this moment, a white shadow flashed past, and before the three of them could react, the 2 pieces of meat on the barbecue grill vanished. That white cat! Li Weiwei and Ji Yuner both exclaimed simultaneously. Wasn't it precisely that famous white cat on the wall of the courtyard they now saw? Its mouth held the 2 pieces of barbecued meat, and they could actually see the proud look on its face as if it was mocking the 3 of them. How about it? I still succeeded, didn't I? It devoured the meat ravenously, and in moments, the 2 pieces of meat were completely eaten. No wonder it was that fat. This time, Ling Han had kept his guard up, but he still did not manage to stop it in time. Don't just look at how this fat cat had such a rounded stomach, its speed was really incredibly fast. Wah, that was my meat! Li Weiwei instantly screamed out horribly, and angrily pointing out with a finger said, Damn cat, you dared to steal my meat, this is not over. Ling Han could not help but smile and said, That was my meat, all right? I know you're very excited, but you should still distinguish between who's the host and the guest. Li Weiwei humphed and declared, You are my man, so your meat naturally is mine as well. This cat. This isn't a cat, it's the divine beast White Tiger. Small Tower suddenly exclaimed. Yesterday, I had some suspicions, but could not confirm them. But now, I can definitely confirm that this must be a descendant of the White Tiger. Ling Han gave an, Ah. This round and fat cat actually wasn't a cat, but a tiger? This had to be a mistaken reincarnation, right? How could it have possibly developed into this kind of creature? He could not help but ask mentally, Are you sure? Ho ho, only a descendant of the White Tiger would exude such a noble air. There's no mistake, Small Tower answered. Is the White Tiger very strong? Ling Han asked. He had seen a descendant of the true dragon before, and even the latter could do nothing but be thrashed by his hand. TSK, what you encountered could still be considered as a descendant of the true dragon? Small Tower scoffed. At most, there was only a sliver of the bloodline of the true dragon in him. However, this white tiger cub is different. Its bloodline is extremely dense, but it seems to have suffered some serious injury, which led to it being unable to completely exhibit the true strength of its bloodline. Hold on, just how strong is the white tiger? Ling Han asked. Do you know about the Genesis tier? Small Tower countered with a question of its own. Was this not a nonsensical question? Ho ho, if it was the white tiger in prime condition, then a puff of its killing intent would be able to eliminate someone in the Genesis tier, Small Tower answered with disdain. Really? Ling Han did not dare believe it. Genesis tier is the strongest ability of this world. Even if both are on the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier, there would still be a world of difference, right? What more when? What more when what? Nothing, just concentrate on your cultivation and don't talk so much nonsense. Ling Han really felt like beating someone up. Wasn't this topic started by this Tsundra Tower? He did bother to argue and asked, Then how about the descendant of the white tiger? Do you have the ability to tame it? If I did not, would I speak so much nonsense with you? Small Tower humphed. Fine, it was acting Tsundra again. However, this time, Ling Han was not planning to bicker again. He asked, How do we tame it? Wait, it has an owner. With how proud the white tiger is, how could it possibly serve trash the likes of the heavenly body tier? Take out some godly metal. The white tiger has an elemental alignment of metal, and can absorb the strength of godly metal to increase its cultivation, Small Tower said. Ling Han gave an ah. Now, the Black Tower would be able to produce a piece of godly metal every year. If he left it aside without using it, the quality of this piece of godly metal could be endlessly boosted. But, only a single year had passed at present, so he only had that one piece of godly metal in his possession. You cannot catch a wolf without being willing to sacrifice your child. This white tiger is still young. You can establish a good relation with it now, and if you can cure its illness in the future, it would not be difficult for it to acknowledge you as its master. Even if it is, it is still a very strong existence. Small Tower said. Ling Han considered the matter, then took out the godly metal. In any case, he was still some time away from immortal level. Moreover, as long as he had a large amount of true origin stones in hand, wouldn't it be a simple matter to bug godly metal? This is godly metal. Li Weiwei was the princess of the left minister's residence after all, so she recognized it for what it was with a single look. She could not help but be surprised. Blockhead, where did you get the godly metal from? It can't be you stole it from somewhere, right? Ling Han ignored her and merely waved the godly metal around in front of that fat cat, and asked, "Fat and round cat, do you want this piece of godly metal?" The fat cat instantly puffed up in indignation. It was the descendant of the white tiger, so how noble was it? This guy really is immortal indeed, to not know how amazing I am. It pretended to be aloof. Do you think that just because you're waving around a piece of whatever godly metal, I'll be hooked? You are really looking down on me. Ling Han thought for a moment, then drew out a ball of wool from within the Black Tower, and tossed it onto the ground. Meow! The fat cat instantly could not restrain itself and pounced over. Directly pouncing onto the ball, it finally realized it was much too unreserved, actually being seduced into revealing its true nature by a ball. It hurriedly crouched down, and using its claws, combed through its whiskers, putting on an act of being aloof.